me into a hornet's nest.
Good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the DeKalb City Council, November 13, 2017. Prior to our roll call this evening, I'd like to remind folks, and we have a good crowd tonight, if you have any desire to speak to the City Council tonight on any issue, we'd ask that you bring your speaker request forms up to our City Clerk, Sue Herman. Thank you. Now that we've called the meeting to order, I'd like to ask our City Clerk to call the roll, please.
Jacobson,
Here.
Fanouken,
Here.
Marquardt,
Here.
Fagan,
Here.
Noriko,
Here.
Verbeck,
Here.
Favor,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. I'd like to ask everyone to stand and have Officer Nachman lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I knew about the second part, I could tell. I'm sure.
Thank you, Officer Nachman. Moving forward now, the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, I'd ask a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve tonight's agenda. Roll call, please.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Marquardt,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbeck,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
There are no public hearings announced for this evening. We'll move on to special items or presentations. Our first one is Proudly DeKalb, the Healthy Partner Award presentation by Live Healthy DeKalb County. And Patty Hoppenstedt, our Assistant City Manager, I'm told, is going to introduce some folks tonight. Patty?
So, Mayor, I'm just going to turn this over to the President of Live Healthy DeKalb County, who is going to be presenting the awards this evening. So, Mike, if you can come up, please.
Michael Kokot, if you'd introduce yourself, please.
Sure, thank you, and good evening. My name is Mike Kokot. I am the chairman of Live Healthy DeKalb County. There we go. This is going to be way too high for the next person, so sorry in advance for that. Live Healthy DeKalb County is a coalition of 34 businesses, individuals, and organizations whose mission it is to motivate people to embrace a healthy lifestyle and whose vision is to create healthy and active communities throughout DeKalb County. The Healthy Partner Award is to recognize individuals that have truly modeled this type of behavior and this type of influence in our communities. And these folks really have an impact in people's lives individually as well as in a whole. Each year, either one individual and or one business or organization is nominated and is elected to be a recipient of the Healthy Partner Award. And this year, we actually have one individual who is here with us today and one organization who is also with us here today. And what I'd like to do is, I would like to recognize the individual as well as the person that nominated this individual, and then afterwards have the same type of honor for the organization as well. So I would like to call up two people right now. One, I would like to call up Shelley Tranchita, who is the individual who was the recipient of the Healthy Partner Award. Come on up, Shelley. And then And then I'd also like to call up a special guest as well, and that is Autumn Carlson, who is one of the students who nominated her. And are there a couple others that were also in that class? Why don't you come on up if you have? There you go. Turn it over to Autumn.
So we nominated Mrs. Tranchita, and I'm just going to read the nomination. It says, "The Sycamore High School will not be the great school that it is without Mrs. Tranchita. This is due to her all-around positive attitude as well as her passion for healthy living. She influences us, her students, to work hard and strive to be their best every day. She offers a mind and body fitness class to the students at Sycamore High School. This class entails a positive environment where students participate in yoga, meditation, Pilates, and high-intensity workouts. Also, she informs her students on the benefits of essential oils. She is also the advisor of a club called the Cheetah Girls, which promotes health and wellness. Some activities this club has organized is multiple paddleboard and yoga trips, hot yoga, bike to school, and Zumba and smoothie Sundays. She leaves a lasting impact on her students in a way that encourages them to make healthy life decisions, which then spreads throughout the community. We, her students, strongly believe that Ms. Tranchita is the best candidate to receive this award."
Congratulations.
Thank you, Autumn, and thank you guys. That was wonderful. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to recognize my colleagues from Live Healthy DeKalb County. They work hard to truly make an impact and partnering with people like Shelley and our soon-to-be-named organization recipient as well. And so Patty Hoppenstedt, who's been so helpful in many of our initiatives through Live Healthy DeKalb County, Deanna Keda from the DeKalb Community Mental Health Board, Amy Dahl from the DeKalb Park District, Anita Zerbrug from the DeKalb County Community Fund, from the YMCA, Mark Spiegelhoff, Dave Dick, and Cammie Loving, and last but not least, Lisa Cummings from NEM Kish Hospital. I think we have them all. Thank you all for coming out and supporting both Shelley and our next nominee and our award recipient for the Healthy Partner Award, the organization, and that is very deservedly to the city of DeKalb. You were nominated by Kate Norrico, who's right in front of me, Cindy Kabak. And what she wrote is this, and that is, the city of DeKalb has embraced the goals of Live Healthy DeKalb County through a variety of initiatives. Early on in the community garden programs, the Mayor's Garden was planted next to City Hall and continues to thrive to produce fresh produce for the community. The city has actively participated as a member of the Live Healthy leadership team and supports the initiatives coalition. In particular, the city has supported the efforts of the Active Transportation Initiative in a variety of ways that has impacted the health of the community now and into the future. When presented the idea of becoming a bike-friendly city, management as well as the council embraced the idea and supported staff in working on this goal. Although time-consuming and detailed process, the staff completed the application with team members. We're very pleased to learn that the city of DeKalb received this designation 1 year ago in November of 2016 and was able to compete with cities from across the country. Not only is the award significant, but the fact that it provides a framework to improve active transportation opportunities now into the future to include increased education, improved connectivity, and policies. The city adopted Complete Streets Framework, which is a guide to future development to include access to all forms of transportation, added bike racks, and has also adopted ordinance to enforce safe cycling in the community for both the cyclists as well as drivers. As a member of DSATS, the city of DeKalb has advocated and obtained state funding for new and better connectivity of trails and walkways. Several examples include the improvements of Bethany Road, Fairview, and the upcoming completion of the connectivity of Prairie Park and then IU Lagoon, which I think is that done, or is that not quite done yet? The city of DeKalb is very deserving of this award. Thank you, members of the city council and leadership. Thank you very much.
Would you like me to come down, or?
Please join us.
It's a fit initiative, you gotta go for a walk. It's a fitness initiative, you gotta go for a walk. Thank you, sir.
I'll stand in back because I usually in the back.
There you go.
I'd like to respond to that if I may. First of all, it's a surprise I had not heard about this, but as many of you might suggest, I'm among the last to know, right? First of all, Kate, thank you for making that nomination.
I didn't, it was Cindy Kapek.
Oh, it was Cindy Kapek.
Mike looked at me and I inspired him.
It was Cindy. Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate Cindy's willingness to do that. And, you know, there were a number of things mentioned, the bike trail and you know, the flowers. Judy Schneider and what she's done in this community this summer, those flowers were just ablaze in those plants. And so, Mike, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. And it's nice to hear a comment once in a while. Jean Lowry alluded to it. Sometimes we don't hear the compliments. And so on behalf of the city of DeKalb, on behalf of our staff, our city council, our various commissions, and most of all, our citizenry, we thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, now moving on with the agenda tonight. Number 2, presentations. Executive Director of Barb City Manor, Maureen Garrity, is here to make Barb City's annual report to us.
He's skipping an item. Mayor, can I just point out there's one other item before that? I don't know if, unless you're not going to address it on the agenda this evening.
Can we go ahead with this?
Sure,
And
it's your
then
call.
go
I just
back,
wanted to
and
point
then I'll
out.
give David and Bill a chance to speak. I appreciate that. Thank you. Hi, Maureen.
Hello. I have the loudness going on, so if I get too loud, just say so. I'm Maureen Garrity. I'm the administrator at Barb City Manor Retirement Home. We have been providing retirement residence for senior citizens of DeKalb for 38 years, and we are housed in a city building, the old public hospital, and it still belongs to the city, and we are really grateful for that relationship. This is the annual report of what we've done with the TIF funding that the city has awarded us. In fiscal year 2017, we used City of DeKalb TIF funds to replace the gate valves to the BCM, BCM is short for Barb City Manor, chiller system, and a steam to hot water heat exchange unit for the boiler system. This project was just completed because the work could only be done in between heating and cooling season, and it got too warm too soon for us to do it after the winter, so we completed it just before the cooling, warming season, heating season. We haven't yet received the payment request from the contractor. The bid amount was $29,634. There were some additional project-related expenses that Barb City Manor paid out of pocket, so the total cost is going to be $39,420. The second project that was on our list for this year was the East Wing Fire Escape Replacement Project, but that ended up being delayed. We were having some problems with the project specification details. The fire escapes are on the east wing of the building, which is the 1921 wing. The newer wing, the fire escapes are enclosed, so the stairwells are part of the building, so they're all inside. On the east wing, they are outside, and they're metal and cement. And the cement is starting to deteriorate, and so that's necessitating this project. And there are quite a bit of details because the stairs are actually were built into the building at the time that the building was built. So the deciding, figure out how to remove those and then replace them and make them sturdy and safe has been a little bit of a challenge. But those details have been worked out. The project is out to bid, and the bid opening is scheduled for Wednesday of this week. So we don't have a cost figure yet. That project we had hoped to do that project this summer, and so that we were planning to use the rest of the 100,000 TIF funds for that. So we are going to request to have those funds rolled over into 2018 so that those funds can be used for that project, and we expect the work to begin in the spring of 2018. In the meantime, we had an emergency project in April. We experienced some very heavy rains this spring, and due to that, they came from an odd direction, an unusual direction. They came from the east, and as a result, we discovered breaches in the masonry of the east wing that resulted in flooding inside the building, including in a resident apartment. So we hired Siler's Tech Pointing and Masonry to repair the area. Because of the location of the breaches, this was in the east wing, they had to rent a lift truck so that the workers could safely access those areas. And the total cost of that project was $9,210. Barb City Manor did pay Siler's directly, and then we're hoping to get reimbursed by the city. I do want to thank you all on behalf of the residents of Barb City Manor, as well as our volunteer board of directors, for your continued support of our retirement home. Barb City Manor remains a very affordable, comfortable, and secure home for the senior citizens of our community, and the support of the city of DeKalb through the TIF funding that it has provided over the years has truly helped us to make a difference and to further our mission to offer a safe and healthy and affordable option for retirement living for seniors. So, thank you.
Are there any questions or comments for Maureen? If not, thank you very much for the report.
Jerry?
Oh, yes, David, I'm sorry.
It's not specifically for Maureen, it's more directed at the council. If you haven't had a chance to get over and do the behind-the-scenes tour of Barb City Manor, I know a lot of you have probably been there in your course of stay here. Go over there and see what they've done with that building. Go over there and see the massive boilers. I had the opportunity to do it with Maureen a few months ago, and it is worth every second of your time to go check it out.
Thank you. Yeah, it is an incredible facility.
It's
Thank
a
you, Maureen.
wonderful building, and it's a fabulous use of the building, and thank you, David. We appreciate your good words, so, yeah.
For those of us who have been around a long time, it's one of the two old hospitals we have, in town, so.
And
thank you very much.
it is the safest building in the city to be in case of an emergency, so.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, everyone.
Now, let's move back to item number one, item B, Annie Glidden North Revitalization Plan Task Force update. For those of you who may recall, I had the pleasure to appoint a task force charged with working with Camaros on the North Annie Glidden Road Revitalization Plan. I've asked two of our aldermen who have quite a few residents of theirs, their constituents in that particular area. Alderman Bill Fanouken from the 2nd Ward and Alderman Dave Jacobson from the 1st Ward. And I've asked them at each and every council meeting to provide an update on the Annie Glidden North Revitalization Plan. Bill and Dave.
Jerry, Dave's going to provide the presentation this evening.
Okay, great. Dave?
We've held our second meeting of the Annie Glidden North Task Force. We had almost 20 of the members attend this time. We're looking for some times and dates to try to get a little bit better participation from the appointees. I know during the workday is difficult for some and better for some, so we are trying to find that happy medium. We held the meeting out at the Community Resource Building at the County Building, which is an awesome facility. I had never been into that room, and it was great for the facilitation of the meeting. They had great screens and good acoustics and all those great things. We had several community members there, and the discussion, again, focused around some of the Camiros presentations relating to some of the community input they're getting from both students and from some of the other meetings they've held. The prevailing thoughts at this meeting, I think, that were interesting were a desire to really get up and working. While they appreciate some of the information being presented to them, it seemed to be a consensus by most in the room that they want to really start to get to the discussion point and to get to work, which I think is a really good indicator and a really good sign that they're excited and motivated to start tackling some of the issues. I know we're talking about scheduling an additional meeting now that wasn't originally planned for next month, to start those discussions directly without Camiros facilitating that meeting, knowing that they will still have a meeting or two that they do have to still come in and present. The other big ask, I think, that came out of the consensus of the room was they are looking to appoint a chair of that group to both open the meetings and to start direct some of the agendas, along with the discussion of how they, as task force members, add things to their own agendas, which I think was very productive conversation. Again, it shows a willingness to really jump in and dive in and start tackling some of those issues. While Bill and I certainly appreciated that our names were mentioned as the chairs, we explained that we are effectively ex officio members of the task force as the council liaisons, and we didn't think it was appropriate that either one of us did it. We had a brief conversation before in between Cow and the meeting and discussed the strategy of going back to the next task force meeting, having the task force itself put up 4 or 5 names of people that would be interested and having them decide who they feel their chair should be. And I talked to Mayor Smith today, and he felt that was a good strategy to pursue.
I think so.
So that will be our focus of our next meeting, obviously, or at least one of the agenda topics is getting some of those names, starting to have the discussion, and then electing a chair at the subsequent meeting. Beyond that, obviously, there's lots of work to do, and we are still at the beginning stages. So it's been interesting to see how quickly they've jumped in and want to get rolling, and I'm excited to see that.
Thank you. And I think it's nice to see how quickly we've moved on some of the items. I mean, our entire committee of the whole meeting really was sort of precipitated by Annie Glidden North and that revitalization plan. Kate, did you have a comment?
I just have a question. The timing of the next community meeting, is it likely to be before the next task force, or is it beyond that time, or?
Being that we're adding a meeting, again, there was, Camiros had stated that they didn't feel they could get out here in early December before the holidays, so they had intentionally scheduled off in December to not have a meeting. Now that we're jumping in and adding an extra meeting in the interim and in the short, in a compressed time frame that we didn't intend to have, at the request and at the bequest of several of those task force members, I would guess our next community meeting is after the holidays at this point, and this would be a meeting for them to start fleshing
Kind of
out some of their
an
ideas.
organization type meeting. Okay, thanks.
Right. Mayor, if I may add, The next community meeting will definitely be after the holidays, after the task force meeting that is being discussed about in December. We definitely want to have the next community meeting when the students are back from holiday break. We have heard feedback in the past that if we're really going to be all-inclusive of the neighborhood residents, that holding the community meeting while the students are off on break and potentially home for the winter break, that would not be very inclusive. So Camiras is specifically looking at something, after the winter break, and I use winter break and, after the mid-January timeframe. So the task force meeting that was requested and not really on the Camiras' timeline per their for their proposal will be before then.
Thank you.
But what Dave, you alluded to is there will be an organizational meeting of some kind in December.
The task force asked to have a meeting that all of the task force members were present, that they can start doing some agenda listing and organization with them in the room, obviously, and not necessarily a facilitated discussion as the first couple meetings have been. And we felt that was productive, and it was more than accommodatable from our standpoint as the liaisons. And again, I've been excited to see that they are taking a very hands-on approach. And it's rare that committees want to jump into more meetings, especially when they're hours long.
Yes.
So
Especially in December.
we
yeah,
have
yeah.
opened it up to their desire and their will, and we are there to facilitate. So I
Great.
find it to be very appropriate at this point.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Bill, for your leadership on being liaisons to this council on the Annie Glidden North Revitalization Plan. There being no further discussion, let's move on to item number 3 on the agenda, the approval of the mayor's appointments. I do have one appointment. I'd like to read this, the appointment of Finance Director Molly Talkington to the Police Pension Board for the completion of a 2-year term through April 30th, 2019. I'd ask for a motion to approve my appointment.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Now we move to public participation, and if someone is registered to speak on an item not listed on our agenda, we have quite a few agenda items tonight, and for those of you who wish to speak to those items, we will wait until we get to that item on the agenda for tonight. I only have one speaker who wants to speak to an item on the agenda, and it is on the agenda. So we have nobody who would like to speak to to an item not on the agenda. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. For those of you, again, watching and in the audience tonight, as you know, we handle a consent agenda on an omnibus vote. All items listed on the consent agenda are enacted by one motion. There's not separate discussion of these items unless requested by a council member, in which event that item will be removed from the consent agenda. And our consent agenda reads as follows. Number 1, approval of city council minutes. A, minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of October 9, 2017. B, minutes of the regular city council meeting of October 9, 2017. Item number 2 under the consent agenda, receive and file. Accounts payable and payroll through November 13, 2017 in the amount of $3,516,108.97. And B, FY 2017 Human Services Funding Third Quarter Report. Those are the items on the consent agenda. I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda and all items listed therein.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion carried. Now we move on to items for separate action. Again, if you would like to speak to any of the items on our agenda tonight, please fill out a speaker request form and give it to our city clerk, and she'll give it to me. As many of you who have been attending recent city council meetings, what we've tried to do is to allow a presentation on an ordinance or resolution. We then would like to welcome your comment before we open it up to the council. That way they have a chance to get your input, if in fact we have any input from the audience. Our first item tonight, ordinance 2017-044, amending Chapter 23, Unified Development Ordinance for miscellaneous text amendments. This is the first reading. I'd ask Principal Planner Dan Olson to speak to this item. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item involves miscellaneous text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance. The Commission had initial discussions regarding these amendments at their September 20th meeting. From that discussion, we did prepare a public hearing notice regarding those proposed changes, and that hearing occurred on October 18th in front of the Commission. So I'll summarize the proposed changes. The first area was Article 3, definitions in the UDO. There was some definitions added for various accessory type structures needed. This would help in better enforcement and interpretation of the regulations. So amendments were proposed to add definitions for unenclosed porch, patio, stoop, and deck. In addition, the definition for accessory building was modified, and definitions were created for the structure and accessory structures to assist, again, in the interpretation. We did have a proposed change in the definition for impound yard to remove it from the definition, or remove it from being classified as a junkyard. We need to take a little closer look at this as a staff and the implications, and we may present that back in the future for consideration by the council if warranted at that time. Final changes in Article 3 would add definitions for the Community Development Director and Public Works Director, and referencing and adding or his or her designee to those, so we didn't have to mention that all the way through the ordinance. Article 5, the zoning district regulations, we moved self-storage facilities from a permitted use to special use in the light industrial and heavy industrial districts. That use has some unique characteristics such as outdoor storage, 24-hour activity, security, and lighting that may warrant further review and conditions if located in certain areas of those particular zoning districts. Again, with impound yard, we were going to add that as a separate special use in those two districts. We're not including that at the time, and we'll have staff will review that in more detail and may bring that forward in the future. We also renumbered or took out the numbering of all the permitted and special uses in the districts. This will help in the future if we do any amendments in terms of all the renumbering we have to do. So let's make the ordinance a little more efficient when we do any future amendments. Article 7, we did amend the that's the supplemental district regulations. We did some amendments regarding the setback exceptions. We also added, made it clear in terms of accessory uses for added swimming pools in ground and above ground, and added a minimum setback for those of 10 feet from the side and rear yard, and also 5 feet for any equipment associated with the pool, those setbacks. The development impact fee article, we just modified some of the charts to make sure they're consistent between the bedroom counts. There's no changes in the fees proposed there. In the sign regulations, there's a separate sub-article regarding the penalties for violation of the sign regulations. We're proposing to remove those. Chapter 1 of our municipal code already has regulations regarding codes and fines for violations of the city code. So we removed from Article 13 out. Temporary signs, changed the administration of temporary signs from the Public Works to Community Development Department to match current practice. Article 16, there's a provisions regarding enforcement in there that we also removed because that's covered in Chapter 1 of the municipal code. And several articles too, we just cleared up some, we had some leftover department names, engineering department, engineering services department, which we removed and changed to Public Works in those cases. Again, we had initial discussion by the commission on the 20th. At their October 18th meeting, they did recommend approval 5-0, unanimous. We did have a couple members absent. So staff would recommend approval of the ordinance as drafted and would request waiver of the second reading of the ordinance.
Alderman Noriko.
I have probably a simple question. What is an impound yard?
Impound yard is where cars are taken that are been impounded or taken from a property that may have been towed off a property that was in violation of the parking regulations and brought to a yard where they could be reclaimed later. So we didn't want to mix that with a wrecking yard initially.
Yeah. Okay.
But we want to take a further look at that because we had some past experience where impound yards kind of turned into more junk yards and out of control. But impound yard, pretty much where cars are taken that and they can be claimed later.
Okay, thank you.
I thought you said he had a couple.
No,
Okay.
simple, like I was hoping.
Yeah, I admire our Planning and Zoning Commission, Dan, and I know you're there at every meeting, at them going through these ordinances, and so
Yeah.
I commend their action on this.
Thank
I would ask for a motion to approve this ordinance. We have already had that, right?
No. So moved.
Second.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Alderman Verbeek.
Mayor, it was requested that we waive second reading, so shall I make a motion to pass first reading and waive second reading?
Okay. Second.
Been moved and seconded that we
So
move. Yes, Dean.
Not to delve too deeply into the procedures here, but if you have a motion on the floor for first reading,
We should vote on that.
I would recommend you vote on that before the second motion.
Any discussion on the first motion and second on the first reading? Roll call, please.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, now, Mike, would you make that motion to waive second reading?
I move to waive second reading.
Second.
A second, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Dan.
In accordance with the past discussions of City Council, that'll be reflected in the minutes as waiving second reading and passing the ordinance this evening then.
Thank you. Number 2, ordinance 2017-045, approving the final plat of the Unified Wire and Cable Re-Subdivision, 333 Dietz Avenue and 338 Wurlitzer Drive. First reading. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Now with a description of this suggested ordinance, once again, Dan Olson.
Thank you. Unified Wire, they're located on Wurlitzer Drive. They have their main offices there and a warehouse. They also have an existing 16,000 square foot warehouse just to the east on Dietz Avenue. What they'd like to do is add on to the warehouse on Dietz Avenue about double the size, a proposed warehouse addition of 15,200 square feet that would be added on to the north end of the building. They're also proposing to install a 10-foot wide breezeway between the new warehouse addition to the main building on Wurlitzer Drive. I provided a site plan in your packet that kind of shows the proposed layout. They actually have started construction on it. The existing building on Wurlitzer Drive, actually the two buildings are located on separate lots, actually in separate subdivisions, and there's a lot line between them. And with the breezeway connecting the buildings, they would like to consolidate the lots and create one lot, about 4.3 acres, and remove the lot line because the breezeway would go over the lot line and violate the setback regulations. So they'd like to create a one-lot subdivision called Unified Wire and Cable Re-Subdivision. remove the lot line between them. There is an existing 10-foot wide drainage and utility easement along both sides of the common lot lines that will remain. The easement language on the plat that's been prepared would allow the breezeway to go over the easement with consent of the city and ComEd. And Unified Wire and the city have already discussed with ComEd what they would need to be able to do that, put the breezeway over there. There's no other utilities on there. There is a private storm sewer along that too, but not under the city's control. So the plat was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their last meeting on October 18th. The commission recommended approval of the plat by a vote of 5-0. Subject to all staff comments being addressed, which they've revised the plat to meet all those comments and are presented to you tonight. The applicant is represented by John Nelson is here tonight, and they've submitted a letter requesting waiver of second reading, and with the commission's policy, as long as there's a unanimous recommendation from the commission, you've entertained second reading, but we'd recommend approval of the ordinance as prepared.
Any further discussion on the original motion? Yes, Kate.
Can you tell me, I realize that taking a look at the property, it doesn't necessarily involve discussion of additional staff, but did that come up? Is there any idea?
Additional employees with the, maybe I'll have John answer that.
Yes, ma'am.
Why don't you come up here, John?
I'm just curious about the scope of the project and so forth.
Yes, we're a machine-intensive environment, so there will be some additional staffing for warehousing and stuff like that. And then we're in business with a business next door, SK Express, and there we supply them all their electrical wire needs. And they're trying to add on 500 people right now. So,
okay.
yeah, so there's lots between the city that we are doing and growing, so.
So this is the first step of some other potential economic development, is
Yes,
what you're
yes.
saying? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
John, we appreciate that too. I mean, we,
Thank you, so do
you know, we
we.
talk about, a lot about attraction, but retention is so important.
We appreciate it also.
Yeah. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we pass the original motion. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes,
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
And Mr. Nelson did request to the Planning and Zoning Commission that we waive second reading on that. Is that correct,
Yes,
Dan?
that's correct.
I'd entertain a motion to
So
waive
moved.
second reading.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Further
I
discussion?
second that we waive second reading and approve.
Okay. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Item number 3 on our agenda, ordinance 2017-046, authorizing participation in a U.S. Department of Justice grant to fund a grant coordinator for the Police Mental Health Collaboration Project between November 1, 2017 and October 31, 2018, and amending the FY 2017 budget in the amount of $75,000. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'd like to ask our Police Chief Gene Lowry and Commander Jason Leverton to speak to this item. Who's going to do that? Jason? Hi.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'm also going to ask Deanna Cada if she would come up here with me as well. She's the Executive Director of the DeKalb County Community Mental Health Board, who will be a primary partner in this project. Earlier this year, Deanna met with Chief Lowry and me regarding this opportunity for a Department of Justice grant for a police/mental health collaboration project. The project is a research and planning grant to determine the extent of unserved and underserved needs of persons suffering from mental illness throughout the community. Specifically, the project is designed to create a strategic plan for providing initial and ongoing mental health services to persons with mental illnesses who frequently come into contact with the police and other public service providers. The goal of the project is to identify potential solutions for persons who fall through the cracks of traditional mental health care services and consequently require the repeated response of law enforcement who presently have insufficient options in providing an effective remedy for these individuals. The level of police contacts with persons suffering from mental illness continues to grow. This is likely due to a number of factors, such as the state having closed a number of mental health hospitals, difficulty for persons without adequate insurance to obtain necessary care, a reduction of comprehensive mental health care providers in the area, and sadly, even an influx of military veterans with mental illness that are not properly diagnosed and cared for. The police department applied for a $75,000 planning grant through the Department of Justice and was notified last month that it was named a recipient of the competitive grant for that full amount. While the city manager's office has preliminarily agreed to the terms of the grant, city council approval is required to technically increase staffing in order to hire a grant coordinator to administer the grant. The grant itself requires and pays for a one-year part-time position to serve as the grant coordinator. The coordinator will examine the purpose and protocols of the grant, design a planning team made up of public service and healthcare providers in the community, prepare and administer a request for proposal for a professional research entity to perform the study of mental health needs, and ultimately to prepare a plan for improved mental health care response and services in the community. The coordinator is assisted by federal representatives who provide insight and guidance on how to facilitate the grant. Deanna.
Good evening. After meeting with the police department earlier this year, an initial planning meeting was conducted. Representatives of many public service partners were identified and invited to attend the meeting where the grant opportunity and its parameters were discussed. Representatives from a host of agencies participated, including those from Hope Haven, Safe Passage, Northern Illinois University, Ben Gordon Center, a part of Northwestern Medicine, the Judiciary represented by Chief Judge Robin Stuckert, Family Service Agency, Juvenile Court Services, the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, and still others beyond that. There was overwhelming and unanimous support to apply for this grant and the potential positive impact it could have in providing better services to persons with mental illnesses. At the end of the one-year planning grant, the City of DeKalb could potentially receive additional funding to carry out established plan approved by the federal government. This grant opportunity is ongoing and is well-funded from the Department of Justice.
So the request for approval from City Council tonight is essentially a formality in order to increase staffing to hire the grant coordinator as required and paid for by the grant, and to amend the budget to reflect the payment of the coordinator's salary. Again, the full salary and fringe benefits are entirely paid for by the grant. More specifically, in terms of that $75,000 grant, about 1/3 of the grant money is to pay for the grant coordinator, about 1/3 is for the independent research component, and about 1/3 is for other expenses such as required training sessions, travel, and other administrative costs. The grant period technically already began on November 1st. Deanna and I have been working to initiate the grant process, but the prompt hiring of the grant coordinator will be necessary in order to carry out the terms and the purpose of the grant. Therefore, we respectfully request the approval of the position of this grant coordinator and the necessary budget amendment to facilitate the payroll process, as well as to waive the second reading on the matter due to the time-sensitive nature of this request. And with that, we'd be happy to hear any public comment or any questions from council. Thank you.
Alderman Noriko.
I know from previous comments that Chief Lowry has made that addressing mental health issues in terms of the interaction between those individuals and the police in DeKalb and other areas is really critical. So I applaud your initiative in identifying this grant. I applaud the hard work that I know went into applying for it. Filling out government forms and grant applications is never easy. And I certainly strongly support our approving this and waiving the second reading so that these efforts can begin. This is only the first step, and this isn't going to solve all the problems, but I firmly believe you have to take that first step.
Thank you very much.
So you're requesting second reading also if the first, if this initially passes the council?
Yes, sir, and primarily because we were given such a short window to initiate the grant.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion or questions of Commander Leverton or Deanna Cada? Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Now, I'd entertain a motion to waive second reading.
So moved.
Been moved by Alderman Noriko,
Second.
seconded by Alderman Fagan. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Jason. Thank you,
very much.
Deanna.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving right along, item number 4, Resolution 2017-126, establishing an estimated annual tax levy ceiling for the tax year 2017. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'd like to ask our Finance Director, Molly Talkington, to speak to this item, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So what we're asking for tonight is to pass the estimated tax levy for your property taxes for the city of DeKalb. And what this entails is there's a truth in taxation law set by the state of Illinois that if your property taxes for the 1 year are going to be greater than 105% of the prior year, that there's a required notice that will be in the paper. A lot of people affectionately call it the black box notice. So in order to do that, we need to set the estimated property tax rate with the council and the mayor. So the estimated levy that's included right now in the proposed FY18 budget document that you have online is an increase in the police and fire pensions that also includes a change to the actuarial assumptions to reduce the investment return assumption from 7.5% to 7%. It includes $72,000 for the IRMRF funding, which meets the part of your very first policy regarding property tax levy. So 1A is to fully fund police, fire, and IRMRF through the property tax levy. So you are doing that in this estimated levy with police and fire, but only a very small portion of IRMRF is included. Additionally, this includes all of the special service areas. There is one change to the special service area that's included here, and that's to the Greek Row SSA. There's an increase of $7,000 in that SSA. The library levy is also included for that notification. That levy is the same as last year. I did speak with the library director. They have not received the grant funding, so they are keeping the levy at that same rate. And the estimated levy also includes all of the debt service, which the city of DeKalb then later abates back all but the library's portion of the debt. So that portion is included in our estimated tax levy, and that would be part of what's included in that black box notification as required by the state for your consideration this evening.
Discussion. Questions of Molly. Alderman Jacobson.
I guess my preliminary question would be, obviously you did have that conversation with the library. Is there any additional update to that, knowing?
No, basically it's where the last time I spoke to her, and I think the last update the council and I know FAC received is that they are approved for grant funding. It's waiting for signature, and that once they get a signature of the approval, then it would go to be processed for payment. But as this council and mayor is aware, the state does take some time to do that. So right now, the library's not counting on grant funding for the following year at this point. So they're keeping the tax levy the same until they know more information.
Does that answer your question, David?
It's an answer.
Okay. So basically, in approving this resolution, we would then forward to our discussion on Thursday night, I would suspect, and we have a certain amount of flexibility. If we were not to pass this, we are then really making a decision for the Finance Advisory Committee and the City Council's joint meeting on Thursday as to the limit that we would go to. Is that a fair assessment?
Mostly. So,
Okay.
so the truth in taxation has to go if you know you have a potential to go above 5% of the levy last year. And so you do essentially a preemptive notice to the citizens that you could go up to this amount. So it's a ceiling amount. What most cities in the city of DeKalb is, we set that as the ceiling and you wouldn't go above it. And that's more of an internal decision because there is kind of a secondary notice process if you adopted a levy higher than what you thought, or if it was higher than 5% and you thought it was going to be less and didn't do that truth in taxation notice, there's a second notice period. But I'd say most cities don't want to entertain that second round because it's after you've approved the levy. So they really use this kind of earlier notice period as to set the ceiling of how high they would go on their tax levy. But you can always reduce under without having to do a secondary review.
So it's almost like a heads up.
Correct.
Alderman Favor.
Yeah, so this is the third budget, and I get heartburn every time we talk about this. I understand it's procedural. We have to do this. It's a notice. I just hate saying we're going to spend this much money, and then it always seems like a fight to get down below, because that's what we're going to be presented with on Thursday night will be the full amount, and then it's always a fight to move it back. And we've talked about this. I'd love to be able to say in June or July or August, let's shoot for this rate, develop our budget and see if we can get close to that, and then come to this meeting and say, we worked really hard and we tried meeting your expectations, as opposed to we threw negotiation with the staff, with our best efforts. I'm not wanting to throw staff under the bus. I'm just saying that, they've developed a budget. This is what we're coming to you with. And again, it just creates heartburn because you see this big number. If you look at the average homeowners, looking at this document is expecting their taxes to go up 50%, the city's portion of their taxes to go up 50% over last year. That's what we're telling them in this document. And again, I really feel heartburn with that. And so I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Alderman Fanouken.
Last year's tax rate was 1.20211. What is our estimated tax levy rate going to be for this budget with these numbers in place?
It'd be 1.76067.
Thank you.
Alderman Jacobson.
When is the levy due?
So legally, you need to adopt the estimated levy, and it needs to, there's certain waiting period, which we meet for right now, the estimated time for the truth in taxation would be released in the papers on November 18th. So you have the first reading on November 27th with final adoption scheduled for December 11th. The very final time that the tax levy has to be adopted is before the last Tuesday in December, because that's the day it has to be filed with the county clerk for it to be valid for the following year.
Mayor, if I could just jump in and add a couple points in regards to the timing for the benefit of the council and the community. As I'm looking on the website, I believe we had the Finance Advisory Committee where we reviewed the property tax levy October 5th. So, and I'm going to look at Director Talkington to make sure that this is a correct statement. We did not finalize the budget till we had direction from the Finance Advisory Committee as to how they wanted to recommend the structure of the tax levy. So we can go in whatever direction that the majority of the council wants to go with the tax levy. The reality is we're following our current financial policy, which states, as far as, and I think Director Talkington gave the overview, but if not, she can clarify, of how we fund our employee pension obligations. If you want to change that structure, we can, but until that changes, we're following that and assuming that whatever the council decides to contribute towards, at least the police and fire pension funds will be funded from the tax levy. If that's incorrect and you want to change that structure next year, but we're moving forward on the current policies that we have. So just so you know on the timing of that, that's kind of the background.
It's not this simple. But when we look at something like this, it's either listening to those folks, no more taxes, or versus kicking that can that we've talked about so many years down the road. And it's all tied in this case, into pensions. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I think the benefit of having the joint meeting that you scheduled for Thursday night is hearing the recommendation and the methodology or the reasoning behind the recommendation of the FAC on changing the assumption. You may choose, I mean, the Finance Advisory Committee was very specific of knowing that they're coming at it from one particular perspective on financial only, and that you all as elected council are looking at it from the more community perspective. So when they looked at, this is based on their recommendation to not stay at the 7.5% assumption, they discussed, do you go with that, if you want to say that minimum amount of what the actuary would be recommending, do you reduce it to that 7.25%, or do you reduce it even further to that 7%? And they jump down, if you want to say, 2 steps to recommend it changing to that 7% assumption. So it is your decision as to how you want to handle this tonight or moving forward. What this does, as Director Talkington said, is it sets the ceiling. You will have, I'm sure, further discussion Thursday night with the FAC in regards to this topic.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Marquardt?
Yes.
Fagan?
No.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
No.
Favor?
No.
Jacobson?
No.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Motion fails.
The mayor does not vote on, unless we have 4 yes votes. So, thank you. Motion failed.
So Mayor, before you move off that, can I ask Attorney Frieders what this means, or can another motion be put forward in regards to this?
Yeah, that would, so as the finance director advised, it's a 20-day window when the estimated levy is adopted before the city can take action on adopting the final levy in order to comply with the Truth in Taxation Act. So we would recommend consideration of, if this was not acceptable, what would be. Understanding, and to Director Talkington's point, we ordinarily talk about this as a ceiling, and that's what the council is being asked to establish. On the other hand, if we go back a couple of years to when the library first experienced their issues with losing or the delay of state grant funding for their project, if you recall, what happened at that instance was the city had passed a ceiling The library then came in with a revised levy that was increased, and the city ended up having to increase its levy to encompass the library levy. And so we had to go through that secondary truth and taxation process that the finance director had referenced. So establishing a ceiling tonight does trigger that's what we base our public notice on. We recommend having that be as accurate as possible. But ultimately, if the council chooses to go a different direction, we publish based on whatever your determination tonight would be. We would recommend some form of determination tonight. And then what the ultimate levy is, we will have to analyze and see if it complies with the notice or if a further public notice is required under the Truth and Taxation
So the
Act.
ceiling could be the same levy?
The council could establish an alternate ceiling tonight.
Yeah,
Again,
okay.
for transparency purposes and for compliance with the intent of the Truth and Taxation Act, we would recommend establishing this as a ceiling. But if the council chooses to go in a different direction, we will continue to evaluate it and the final levy that the council passes and make sure we comply with the act.
Alderman in favor.
So you said November 18th is the correct, is it?
Right, so tomorrow I'll have to develop the truth and taxation notice to give time for the newspaper to publish it for November 18th. So there's a very short turnaround time in getting that notice to the paper and then having it available for us to come back to you on the November 27th meeting.
Well, then we have to have a number tonight.
No, we don't.
No, I was going to say,
No,
are we
do
not?
Okay.
So
David?
Thursday's
Again-
November 16th, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But, so my point was going to be Thursday's November 16th, are we not, is that not also an open meeting where after we have had a chance to discuss with the
Yeah,
FAC and talk about additions, subtractions, where we want to end up, to be able to finalize and have a vote at that meeting on November 16th?
So it could be listed as an action item on that date. If the council makes a determination that evening, the turnaround time for publication in the newspaper will not result in this being published on the 18th. So we'll
Correct.
have to go back and evaluate the schedule for the public hearing on the tax levy.
Alderman Verbeek.
Would council be comfortable going forward with no increase from last year as a discussion point?
Wouldn't need to.
I don't think that'll work, but
Alderman
We don't have to
Jacobson.
file a truth and taxation if we're not over 105%, correct?
Correct, in the total levy.
Correct. So, again, now that it's voted down, we've effectively said we can go up to about a 5% raise total. That's the answer that the council just gave, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm comfortable with that.
I would ask Director Talkington, with that methodology, are we capturing the growth in the EAV with the assessment? Because there is some growth factored into it that you have to realize that growth is then spread upon the new growth. So we want to make sure that you capture, or at least the recommendation of staff is that you want to capture that new growth.
Right, you wouldn't capture it totally because the EAV from the county, the estimate's 5.2%. So you would be losing a portion of the, essentially the new development that was added with that.
But at 5.2, we'd have to do the black box.
Correct.
And the number by the 18th, which our city attorney says we cannot do if we make that determination on the 16th. Because of the 48-hour notice, is that
I would make
Well-
a motion to set the ceiling at 5.2%, 105.2%.
But that's where we're at.
Repeat that, David?
I would make a motion to set the ceiling at 105.2% of last year's number. To capture the growth, and we've done this in the past, basically all we're doing then is setting the same bill as last year, but for the growth, to capture that growth.
Can I ask
I have
Director
a motion.
Talkington, can
No.
I ask her, do you know what that dollar amount would be?
Not at the 5.2%. We looked at the pension levy changes.
So if you accept that motion tonight, what we can't tell you at this point is what that dollar amount is going to be, so that if you're looking at doing that, I would suggest you consider then doing that Thursday night at the joint meeting, if the city attorney says you can take that action with that joint meeting, so at least that you have all the information, you'll know the financial implications of that decision. we can deal with the timeliness of this if we have to do something with other meetings, but I would prefer that you have all the financial information in front of you.
Okay. Alderman.
Well, I think Alderman Fanouken was first.
Fanouken, yeah.
All right, so if I'm understanding Dave's motion, though, what he in essence has said that we would leave the tax levy rate the same, correct?
No.
Because let me finish, because if we're levying for dollars, and if we're going to levy at 105.2% of last year's dollars, then the tax rate would be the same if we have that growth of 5.2%.
Well, some of the growth is, it's based on 41% of that is new development, so that would not affect current citizens. The rest of it is, so if you've improved your home,
Right,
there's
there was
some
a
increases.
reassessment, I understand that. But if the EAV has gone up that 5.2% that you're talking about, am I understanding that part correctly?
Mhm.
And then if we were to, by levying for dollars, we just multiply by last year's tax rate, the 1.20211, that we would then have that new dollar number.
Correct, so if you hadn't done any improvements or your property was not reassessed, then yes. If
Then
you
there'd be no
would
change.
just-
But what I'm talking about is in our overall dollar number, our ceiling is 105.2%. All we have to do is multiply this year's estimated EAV by last year's tax rate to have that number.
Right, I just have not done it at the.
Right.
Bill, I
105.
appreciate that. Let me ask this question. That 5.2% is a sure thing.
It's the
Of
county's
EAV.
estimate of.
I beg your pardon?
It's the county's estimate of the EAV growth. I can contact the county and, I know that they have put a lot of information into it, and it's a fairly reasonable assessment, and it shouldn't be very far off of that number if it does have a few variations.
I just want to be pretty darn sure that what we do is going to accomplish what I hear this council trying to do tonight. Alderman Noriko.
I recognize the concern about increasing the tax levy. I'm a citizen too, and I see my tax bill. What I'm concerned about is our responsibilities in terms of the pension funding. And no matter how much we don't like it and how much we don't like, that figure increasing, it's not going away. And I am uncomfortable voting on anything today until, as the city manager suggested, we have more of the financial picture. So I can see, okay, if the levy stays the same, what does that mean in terms of the pension funding? And then if we aren't meeting that obligation, how are we going to meet it? Because I am unwilling to back away from that responsibility, regardless of what the consequences might be for me as a council member. I think, too long. And I don't want to throw other councils on the under the bus, but I guess I'm going to do that. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep, trying to satisfy everyone and not meet these obligations. And, if people say it's too much and we shouldn't have, well, that's gone. This is what it is, and we have to look at what's in front of us.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, it's been moved. Was there a second to Dave's? Oh, yeah, excuse me.
I'm just echoing Alderman Fanouken's idea. That's kind of where I was getting at, is what he was thinking. So once those numbers shake out, that was kind of my thought, was where Bill was thinking.
And we could bring you back a revised schedule on Thursday if you'd rather have all the information in front of you. I can put together the information on the same dollar amount, a 5.2% increase in the you had the pension options, and we can have that for you on Thursday. It's just, we will have to adjust the schedule based on the timelines that are required by the state. But we will look at that and also try to bring that schedule back to you on Thursday as well.
Alderman Jacobson does have a motion on the floor. Do you want to repeat that motion, or would you like to make another comment, David?
I'd like to make a comment. Again,
Okay.
I philosophically, I guess I am making this motion in terms of saying, well, I appreciate there's growth and we should capture that growth. We cannot live beyond our growth. And it doesn't matter what the number is to me. The ceiling is our growth in all categories, whether that's sales tax, whether that's property tax. If we increased the tax base last year, and we did both organically in terms of new development and through reassessment, we should capture that growth. The reality going forward is, I think the precedent should be set that there is no more tax money from property taxes coming to the city. It's the people can't afford anymore. While I realize and appreciate that we have pension obligations, then we have to figure out how to correct those. And we're gonna have to make some very tough decisions. We're gonna have to have a discussion at some point. Do we fund pensions at all at this point? If we can't afford to pay for them and they're 30 or 20 or 10% funded, at one point, do we say it's a lost battle and we figure out how to move on from that battle? I don't think we're there yet. I think philosophically, again, I'm making the motion in the spirit of our cap should be our growth. And if we have negative growth, then we have to change that cap negative downward, and that's gonna be even more difficult. Luckily, we're in the spirit of this year, or in the frame of this year, we had a 5.2% growth. The reality is, in you setting that as the ceiling, the people that were not reassessed last year, or the new construction, effectively will not pay 1 penny more this year than they paid last year. So you're leaving those people to say, we aren't going to raise your taxes, and we're going to capture the new growth. Again, whether or not I'd vote for that if it came down as a final read, I would probably have to have some more discussion and insight into that. I'm saying set the cap at our growth.
And your motion is to that effect. Correct. Do we have a second to Alderman Jacobson's motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Now, any further discussion?
Dave, can you just clarify what your motion was for me one more time?
That the ceiling will be set at 1.5% to correlate with, or I'm sorry, 105.2% of last year's levy to correlate with the growth only.
So to
of the EAV.
clarify the motion on the floor, then it would be a motion to approve the resolution establishing an estimated tax levy, subject to an amendment to it to adjust the numbers to equal an increase of not more than 105.2%.
Correct.
Thank you.
Alderman Verbeek.
And how much longer do we wait on the library, or wait on the state, I guess I should say? What solutions do we have to start factoring in some type of a schedule over the coming years? But I feel very irresponsible to sit up here year after year after year to say, well, the money's coming from the state, the money's coming from the state. There's no proof in that. So what do we do to work through that as a responsibility to the taxpayer?
And or compel the state to do so through litigation.
Right. I guess more of a comment.
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
No.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
I'm going to vote yes to be in the majority, just in case we need to reconsider this.
Markwart?
So that's the same thing. So you got a majority? There you go.
Yes.
I'm going to say no.
Prevailing side, that's all.
Correct.
Smith?
Yes.
6 yes.
Motion carried. we will have the opportunity for more discussion on Thursday night. Mike?
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
So now you have your information to do the black box posting, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So, yeah, so the black box is going out.
And again, for clarification on that point, that's the ceiling that we publish based off of. If the council adopts a levy finally that is lower than that, we're within that. If the council adopts a levy that is higher than that, then we go through another publication process through the Truth in Taxation Act.
Okay, let's move right along. Item number 5, Resolution 2017-127, approving a request by Destination DeKalb to sponsor the 2017 Illinois High School Association Football State Championship to be held at Northern Illinois University's Husky Stadium on November 24 and 25, 2017, in the amount of $12,500.
So moved.
Motion.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. I'd like to ask our Community Development Director, Jo Ellen Charlton, to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As many of you know, back in 2012, Destination DeKalb won a state bid to host the annual IHSA Football State Championship Tournament in the odd years between 2013 and 2021. So that gives us 5 different opportunities to host this really great event in our community. The tournament has happened twice, and during those 2 years, those first 2 years, it was successful in attracting 30,000 fans and adding over $1 million to our local economy. Once again this year, this will be our 3rd of 5 years. We are being asked to support this effort by Destination DeKalb by approving a resolution authorizing $12,500 in furtherance of that program. With us tonight in the audience, we have both Brad Hoy and Wendy West, who I think they have a couple of things they'd like to say, and then to answer any questions that the board might have.
Brad, Wendy?
Mayor and council members, thanks for the opportunity to come up and talk about this great event, an event that the city of DeKalb has supported for several years, particularly in 2013 and 2015. And I guess the thing I can say is, are you ready for some football? I think Wendy said that in 2015, and I stole it from her because she's going to speak last tonight. But again, your support in 2013 and 2015 is helping us once again put on this great event here in 2017. We'll have 16 teams coming to Husky Stadium, 8 teams, 4 games on the 24th, and another 8 teams and 4 games on the 25th. And it's an opportunity to showcase the great things that we have here at in the city of DeKalb, DeKalb County, and also Northern Illinois University, to communities from all over the state. And as Jo Ellen mentioned, we were able to attract about approximately 30,000 visitors in 2013, 28,000 or 26,000 in 2015. So it's an average of 28,000 and about $800,000 plus of revenue coming into this the DeKalb County area, primarily into DeKalb. So it's a terrific event. It's really one of the few events that brings folks from all over and casts a spotlight on DeKalb. We have some terrific events here in DeKalb and in DeKalb County, but this one brings folks from every point on the map in the state of Illinois. The games are televised on what was once Comcast Sportsnet and now is NBC Sports Chicago. So it's wall-to-wall coverage of not only the folks that are seeing it here live in our community, but also those folks who are watching it on TV. So it's a great bang for our buck, and we really appreciate the support that the city of DeKalb has provided us in 2013 and 2015, and we hope again here in 2017. And I'll kick it over to Wendy for some more facts and figures.
Good evening, council members. My name is Wendy West, and I am the community chair for IHSA Destination DeKalb. Thank you for your support in the past. We really appreciate it, and thank you. I see many familiar faces that volunteered last time. We are still looking for volunteers, so if you are interested, please go to ihsadestinationdekalb.com and feel free to sign up. I just wanted to say this is such a great event for the community. I've heard so many things. This is my third go-round of this, and I've heard so many wonderful things from all the fans that attend. And the students are amazed by our facility that we have at Northern. So, you know, not only is it great for the community, but it's a great recruitment tool for NIU. So I just wanted to give you some idea of some of the economic impact that we have for when we host these teams and the playoffs. So in 2015, there was at least 565 hotel room nights booked in DeKalb and Sycamore. 50 hotel room nights were booked in Rochelle hotels. There were 22,319 tickets sold. Local restaurants reported a 35 to 50% increase in sales from Thanksgiving weekend in 2014. 262 million media impressions with an ad value equivalency of approximately $2.5 million. SportsIllustrated.com coverage along with network television. Gas stations reported an increase in sales. The DeKalb Oasis estimated business for gas and food doubled. 14 private caterings were booked. Several local restaurants booked private fan parties. More than 200 community volunteers worked the event as hospitality and tourism ambassadors. Some retail stores in downtown DeKalb reported their best figure sales since 2013. And 2 teams ordered full Thanksgiving dinners to be delivered to local hotels. So as you can see, not only is it a great experience for the student athletes, it's a wonderful thing for the community. So I just want to thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Brad and Wendy. Alderman Fanouken.
You know, Wendy mentioned that they still need volunteers. I know that City Manager Gora, the mayor, and myself are among the volunteers. I'd encourage you to get out and sign up to perform some function at the event. You know, for some of us are there all day, both days, but there's things that can be there for just even a couple hours that'll help out. And I'd encourage anybody to go ahead and do that.
Any further discussion or comments? Roll call.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
And you two are in charge of the weather.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rolling along, item number 6, Resolution 2017-128, adopting the City of DeKalb 2025 Strategic Plan, Economic Development Implementation Strategies. Motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Economic Development Planner Jason Mitchnick. Hi, Jason. You're going to make a report on this.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, Council. Just wanted to take you through a brief timeline of how we got to this evening. Back on August 22nd of last year, the city looked at changing Chapter 59, which was the ordinance for the Economic Development Commission. A couple of changes were made, and the commission was reconstituted, and new appointments were made following that. Subsequently, during that same time frame, the DeKalb County Community Foundation introduced a new grant program for municipalities in the county to look at getting grants for planning purposes. So the city did apply for the program and was awarded $9,000 to work with the NIU Center for Governmental Studies to be a facilitator with the new Economic Development Commission to create at that time what they were tasked with, which was an economic development strategic plan. Given that the community had just gone through the strategic planning process and the city had adopted the 2025 strategic plan in February of 2016, rather than redoing all that planning work, the Economic Development Commission decided to look at the strategic plan and the economic development initiatives and projects within that plan and prioritize those. So beginning in February, the EDC sat down and had several planning sessions with CGS, discussed elements of the strategic plan, looked at which ones could be combined, which ones could be leveraged against each other, and then began to prioritize those. And ultimately, the document that was attached to the resolution in the packet this evening is the final recommendation that was approved in October of this year and recommended by the EDC for formal adoption. I just wanted to take you through the prioritization of those elements. The chart that was found in both the executive summary and then also the memo in tonight's packet looks at both the tiers, which is essentially the prioritization of those projects, and also the time frame. And the time frame didn't necessarily correlate with the tiers that the EDC put those initiatives into. However, they did try to look and identify specific projects and initiatives that they consider to be low-hanging fruit, things that we would be able to accomplish. The idea was to essentially get some wins early on and stack wins or tally some in the win column. So looking at Tier 1, a couple of different initiatives that were combined was to strengthen the collaboration between the city and Northern Illinois. And then also begin to look into a potential streetscape NIU connector. The Economic Development Commission discussed quite a bit the idea of how to connect the downtown with the eastern edge of campus and how that could potentially be transformative for the community and the relationship between the city and NIU. The second part also looks at the downtown. It was supporting the Arts, Culture, and Entertainment Corridor, or also known as the ACE Corridor, and to continue to evaluate improvements to the Egyptian Theater. Again, that was a component of the ACE Corridor. But the overlap between the ACE and then that streetscape connector, the ACE Corridor, which was adopted by resolution by the city last year as well, it actually incorporates the eastern part of campus. So I believe it goes from Normal into the downtown. Includes the quad area where they have several statues, and there's also several initiatives with the DeKalb Area Arts Council to introduce alternative public art options, such as a statue walk from campus through the downtown. Third item here in Tier 1 is develop, beautify, and add attractions to downtown and west of downtown to England. So again, this is that streetscape connector along Lincoln Highway. There was really a desire of beautify that main corridor, improve the aesthetics, not only for people in the community, but also visitors coming to Northern Illinois University, make that really kind of the premier corridor of the city. The last item in Tier 1 is to market DeKalb assets, such as city-owned property and the airport, and create or improve an expanded citywide event calendar. So looking at the DeKalb assets such as city-owned property, how could those be utilized for events? How could streets such as Locust Street be used for more community events? And how to turn DeKalb into a city that's known for an attraction of community events such as Corn Fest or others. I think looking at Tier 2 is where the majority of them were. I think not necessarily that these aren't important or that the city isn't currently looking at these initiatives, especially number 2 there, which is revitalize England North Corridors. As we all know, we're looking and we are diving into the weeds in that topic. However, I think thinking about low-hanging fruit and early wins, that's not necessarily one that the EDC felt like they were going to be able to figure out a plan and move forward and implement that right away. So that's how they ended up including that in tier 2 versus Tier 1. A lot of these, I think, if you look down at Tier 3, they're more ongoing things, especially programmatic, that don't necessarily have very tangible projects or something that you'd be able to clearly identify as success, which is, I think, why they ended up putting those lower in Tier 3, such as encouraging residential development and growth, encouraging the exploration of a hotel conference center, revitalizing South 4th Street and East Lincoln corridors. I think even though those are a little bit more tangible, they really wanted to focus kind of on the downtown and the connection between NIU and the community. Now that, again, those aren't important, I think it was just in terms of priorities, they really wanted the city to continue to focus on the momentum that's been built in the downtown and moving forward. And with that, I entertain any questions or comments on the plan.
Alderman Noriko.
As the 5th Ward Alderman, whose ward includes, at least a portion of South 4th Street, I'd be remiss if I didn't note that certainly in the time I've been alderman, and I understand for years preceding that, the South 4th Corridor has been neglected. I recognize that downtown is a priority, but an argument can be made that 4th Street is also a corridor into the city. And I recognize that there are not unlimited resources, and there is not unlimited time for both the commission and city staff. I would encourage city staff to, when there's any glimmer in that area, that you at least address the glimmer. It's going to take a long time before that area resurfaces as any kind of priority. But to completely, year after year after year, neglect that area doesn't, it just doesn't bode well, so.
I agree. I appreciate your comments. One thing that I would like to point out, the Park District is actually looking at a master plan for Commerce Park, which is at 4th Street in Fairview. I think depending on what they do in that area, that could potentially be a spark, so to speak, for South 4th Street and how the city can look at building off of what they plan to do after they complete that master plan.
Well, that is, somewhat more encouraging news, because there are those of us who do live south, and there is activity there, and, I'd like to be able to offer something, to the people at that end.
And Alderman Noriko, if I could also add, we continue to have discussions with a property owner that has significant redevelopment opportunity, and some of that property has been developed, but there's still additional area that can be developed, and we continue to encourage him to do so. Secondly, as you may recall, we did move forward on the acquisition and demolition of Pratanos, and we will continue to look at the grant opportunities to the state, because that's going to be, I think, part of the impetus for additional redevelopment in the 4th Street corridor.
Okay.
And
Thank
Kate,
you.
I hear you too, and I commend you for bringing that, not so much to our attention, but perhaps reiterating what we've also heard in the community. I've been really impressed with, in my short time as your mayor, the turnaround in the dynamics of the Economic Development Commission. And part and parcel of that is the addition of Pat Fagan here to the liaison role from the council to the Economic Development Commission. I don't know if you want to say anything, Pat, on your short-term also involvement with that, but I sense that not only would they be very receptive to what Kate's comments are, but taking some of the things that were in this document that Jason shared really play into a lot of the discussions that we're having regarding economic development and TIF phase out, et cetera.
Yeah, I think we've got a really good group on this.
Yeah.
On this committee. South 4th Street's been brought up, obviously. I've got a piece of the action on the other side of the road with you. And also the east side, Lincoln Highway, that's been brought up. It's like I said, we've been there a short time. We're not, we don't have TIF money. And so, the direction has been put right now from the time that I've been on has been on the downtown going out, Lincoln Highway, mostly of that. But, I think with the committee we have, I think they do look at every aspect of it. And we've got some good business owners, we've got some good community people. Everybody on the board is pretty good, so they're all good, I should say. So.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Kate. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Verbeck,
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Moving right along, item number 7, Resolution 2017-129, authorizing the ratification of an agreement with Tip Top Roofing for replacement of a roof at the city's West Lincoln Highway Water Treatment Plant in an amount of $21,680. Our Utilities and Water Superintendent Brian Favor will speak on this item. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. The item before you is seeking ratification of agreement with Tip Top Roofing for the replacement of a roof at the city's West Lincoln Highway Water Treatment Plant. The initial contract amount was $19,780, but during the course of the roof replacement, the contractor discovered water damage to multiple sheets of plywood. In addition, a large part of the remaining decking was loose and required additional labor and materials to refasten. The additional labor and materials increased the total cost of the project from $19,780 to $21,680, or an increase of $1,900. Ratification of the agreement by council is needed as the amount incurred exceeded the initial contract amount. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions or comments? Alderman Fagan.
You're going to stay within budget on this, right?
Yes. The actual budgeted amount under this line item is $35,000.
Right.
For this specific project, it was $20,000. So actually, for this specific project, we will not. It would be over by $1,680.
But overall, you'll still be within budget.
Overall, we will be in budget, yes.
That's what
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Have we moved and seconded on this?
No.
We have, okay. Roll
Motion
call,
to
please.
approve?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion
Roll-
to approve?
Roll call, please.
No, we still need the motion.
Huh?
I thought we had a motion.
No?
Second?
I was catching myself there. I had not called for the motion prior to having Brian come up. I thought that I had, but it's getting late, right? Roll call, please.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Motion carried. Item number 8 on tonight's agenda, Resolution 2017-130, authorizing the city manager to award a bid to Liftoff LLC for an Office 365 subscription and professional services in an amount not to exceed $51,000. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. To speak to this item is our IT Director, Mark Thorson. Mark?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm presenting a recommendation to award a bid to Liftoff LLC for Microsoft Office 365 subscription and for professional services. Currently, the city uses an on-premise Microsoft Exchange email server. I'll get into this a little bit further. When I say words like on-premise, that simply means that the license has been purchased by the city and the software and the equipment to run it resides within the city's private network. You're going to hear terms such as cloud, software as a service, and remote hosting in future agenda items, and it holds true here as well. Think of the cloud as someone else's computer, because that's basically what it is. So with that in mind, we have an on-premise Exchange email server that is currently 3 versions old at this point and is due to be upgraded. In addition to that, when I came on board, I found there were 3 things that needed improvement with regards to collaboration within the city's organization. First is a consistent user experience across the organization, which is something we don't have, and I'll dive into that a little deeper in a minute. Accessibility from outside of the city's private network is another challenge that we're constantly trying to adapt to, and we need new ways to be able to accomplish this. Additionally, some sort of central mechanism for employees to be able to access the files that they need and things that need to be distributed across the city's network to all employees needs to be taken into consideration as well. So with these two things in mind, when I came on board, I found that the city staff was supporting 3 versions of Microsoft Office. And that's because at no point in time was there any fleet-wide organizational stance to migrate all city endpoint devices to the latest version of Microsoft Office. This presents challenges to the IT department because we're supporting 3 different versions. But more importantly, from an employee standpoint and a user experience, is not standard across the board. So when we come out with training materials to help staff improve their skills using the technology that we have, I have to be cognizant of how I'm presenting those materials as well. Sorry, I lost my place here. This also requires us to, from an IT staff perspective, and in terms of supporting those 3 versions, we need to have the 3 different versions of patches and upgrades available. And additionally, working with outside agencies, with older versions of Office, there's compatibility issues. So a city employee sends something to a colleague in another organization using a later version of Microsoft Office, this becomes problematic. Things won't render properly. It is possible that the person can't even bring up the document in some cases. So there's a lot of challenges that we're facing at this point. From a file system standpoint, I talk about accessibility from outside the network. Right now, if staff has a meeting at NIU or at any of the facilities, the library, the Park District buildings, they either have to bring things locally with them on flash drives, or they have to use some sort of special software to tunnel back into the city's private network. Presents a challenge because those things don't always work as advertised. And then there's additional challenges with that. And finally, from that central point, being able to distribute documents across the organization. Right now, we do have an intranet, which is simply a website that is only housed within the system. The issue with this is it's centrally managed. It was developed in-house, and while the intention was good and it did serve a purpose, it is extremely difficult to keep up to date, especially with the resources that we have presently. So what we're asking to do is decentralize this. But in order to do that, and by decentralize I mean, for instance, HR can update their own forms to distribute amongst the city employees. They're not waiting for IT to do those updates for them. Finance can distribute the W-4 forms that the employees need. I just got a request for that today, that those need to be updated on the intranet, and we're having to make time, which is taking us away from other duties that we have to accomplish in order to update that. I would love to be able to have finance update that themselves and be able to keep that current. So that's what I mean by decentralizing this intranet. And in order to do that, we need the tools to be able to do it. So with that, staff investigated what opportunities we could find. And Office 365 through Microsoft has come up as an opportunity to make this happen. In addition to the fact that Microsoft is slowly nudging organizations into their cloud by offering a lot of different benefits. Some of these benefits include the subscription changes. Right now we license per device. This changes from a subscription to per user, which makes it easier for staff to manage those licenses and distribute them as needed. In addition, each employee would then receive up to 5 licenses for Microsoft Office, which means they can, instead of us having to license 5 different devices, perhaps an employee has a laptop and a tablet and a desktop machine for whatever purposes to do their job, we would then be able to license those without having to go to each individual device and worry about that. We are worried about subscriptions from a user perspective. Makes it easier to manage. The subscription also offers that Microsoft will keep everybody on the latest version as soon as that version is available. So we don't have this issue of I need to upgrade. Now, obviously, we want to test those things and make sure that they work prior to distributing them. But the fact is we don't have to sit and wait till the next fiscal year and come back to you to ask for more licenses at that point. We are automatically entitled to those licenses as long as our subscription is current. This also changes our fiscal model, which is a benefit as well. As opposed to a ramp up, which could exceed $100,000 to be able to implement this same way through the traditional licensing model, and having that ramp back down for subsequent maintenance years and having to keep coming back up and down like that. We want to try to plateau that from a cost perspective on a subscription service. So there is no surprises. We know exactly what those costs are going to be as they come. And in fact, this proposal actually locks us in for 3 years for pricing. So we will know what the pricing will be for the next 2 years beyond this initial year. Some of the other benefits to this is Microsoft provides a product called OneDrive. OneDrive is simply a file repository that is located in their environment. Why this is important is we can start eliminating some of the issues that we're having right now when employees and staff go off site to hold meetings. They're not having to worry about how do I get to this file that I need. This will be available to them as through this OneDrive product. In addition to that, right now they're stuck with it has to be a Windows device to be able to do this. OneDrive actually has apps that run on tablets and phones. So that would provide staff that mobility where if they don't even have their laptop with them, they can still access those files when needed. And last but not least, we have SharePoint, which is our intranet solution that we're looking to implement. And this is a tool that is built to allow a decentralized method that we're looking for, where the departments can then, they're not waiting for IT to update their files for them or their sites. They can do this themselves, and that creates it more timely, and it actually promotes a more robust intranet and communication system because you're eliminating potential roadblocks with this. Within this as well, I would like to mention that there is also CJIS and HIPAA compliance that we're looking at. This is a Microsoft Government Community Cloud, which means for our police department does not have to concern themselves with if they put something in OneDrive or they have something in their email system. Email's a little tricky. With OneDrive, if they put something in OneDrive, they don't have to worry about CJIS compliance issues with that because that cloud is designed for that. And we have to assume from a technology standpoint that if the officers have access to a utility or a tool, that there is the potential for criminal justice information to be put into that cloud. And from a fire department's perspective, we fall under a HIPAA covered entity, so we have to be cognizant of HIPAA requirements too, which also played a factor into this. And also, with the product for Office 365, there is advanced threat protection through email. Right now, we've done a lot of work helping train employees on what to look for suspicious emails. How to understand, how to sort of deduce if something may or may not be a scam and what to do with that. That's a very good first step for us. Advanced threat protection gives us another layer of defense. And what security professionals preach nonstop about defense in depth, having as many layers as possible so that you're creating as many obstacles to keep the bad guys out and let the good guys in. So that's another facet that is really only available through the Microsoft Office 365 subscription. You can't get that in an on-premise solution. We released a bid on October 6th. We had a question and answer period happen, and on October 8th, we issued our first addendum of questions and answers that was included in your packet. And we also had a subsequent addendum released on October 20th that just answered another question that was left off of that first addendum. But we did open it up for another couple days for any last-minute questions from vendors. We had we had a bid opening on October 25th at 3:30. We had four bids that were accepted, and we went through and looked and started working on which one we would make the recommendation on. In this case, we are making the recommendation for the lowest bidder, which is Liftoff LLC. And very quickly, they had listed a couple deviations, which they said were deviations from the bid. However, after going through this and actually speaking directly with Microsoft on a couple of these items, we found that the deviations were really not deviations to the requirements of the bid. And that's been outlined in the agenda item as well. I apologize for the very lengthy explanation, but I wanted you to understand the breadth of what this means and really how dynamically changing this tool by itself can be in this organization.
I noticed, Mark, that you said the Liftoff has worked with other communities. Have you talked to any of the other communities?
Correct.
And do you know any of the other IT directors out there who have used this company?
Out of their recommendations, I spoke with Palatine, and they had very positive things to say. In fact, he just said he contacted them within the past couple days on a couple questions with I think it was encryption that he was concerned about with one of the products that he was using. And he also mentioned that he had a rather difficult conversion because he was going from a non-Microsoft product into a Microsoft product, and they were very helpful with that. He spoke very highly of them. And ancillarily, through talking with other colleagues that weren't mentioned in the references but had worked with Liftoff, they had positive things to say with them.
Good.
And Microsoft themselves actually came back and said that they are one of the largest government companies that work with governments at this level. So,
Alderman Orico?
I'm confused, which isn't unusual with the IT issues, but you indicated that it would be easier with the licensing because the licensing would be attached to an individual versus machines. But given employee turnover, and, people leave, machines stay. Why is it easier?
there's less users than there are devices, I guess, from that standpoint. I don't mean to indicate that this is, my life has changed and it's so much easier now. It's more along the lines of it is just slightly easier to be able to manage that than to manage the devices themselves with this particular item.
And could you potentially, even instead of individuals, have it, attached to a position? Because even if the individual leaves, most times the position stays.
Agreed, and that license would then be available once that position is filled again. And also, depending on the circumstances, the department in which that position resides may have the opportunity to transition that license if needed. These licenses can also be used a la carte. We don't have to commit to a certain block or anything. We have the capabilities to incrementally adjust as needed as we go along. And please understand that also with this isn't just users, but there are some instances where it's not actually attached to a user, but it's attached to a service in some fashion, either a resource or something. So we make the determination if someone needs to send an email from that address, but for whatever reason we're not using that employee's address because it may not. For instance, if it is a service of some sort, we want to make it clear that that email is coming from that service.
Okay.
So there are instances where we do that as well.
And I would assume that if this is approved and as you're installing it, council would have to be trained also.
Correct, because this does
Okay, I'm just
impact
warning you
your,
when you have to train me. Just
not a problem.
Thanks for that warning.
Yeah,
Alderman Favor?
So I have a couple of different questions. And in part of the backup material, you state that the subscription is assumed to be 3 years. Have we contacted Liftoff to determine the term?
Okay, so that actually probably needs a little bit of clarification. The term was used for 3 years because I made a comparison in there versus purchasing licenses outright because we have a price lock of 3 years. we have the ability to cancel, change, do whatever we want at any point in time during this. There is no to my knowledge, there is no commitment on that side other than they will lock the pricing for that. But if we choose not to pay it, the subscription cancels.
Right, okay. And obviously, so that's going to be an annual recurring expense.
Which I outlined in there as well, because the first initial cost is obviously more because there's professional services attached to migrate data and deal with issues. But from the standpoint of the subsequent years, I wanted to point that out as to what that subscription cost would be.
Okay. And then the other question so this is going to lead into two different questions. One is our subscription are we subscribing with Microsoft or are we subscribing with Liftoff?
We're subscribing with Microsoft.
Okay.
Liftoff is the third-party reseller that has committed to the pricing that they've provided to us. So my understanding is, and I've actually talked to other colleagues about this as well, but my understanding is subsequent renewals can be done directly with Microsoft.
Okay. And then the question then is so then our data is obviously then it's with Microsoft. It's not under. So if Liftoff were to go bankrupt, we still obviously have access to all of our data.
This is in Microsoft's data center, and just to elaborate a little bit on the CJIS and HIPAA compliance issues, or not issues, but areas, they actually use a government, they call it the GCC, which is the Government Community Cloud. And there's actually a TechNet article on Microsoft's website that explains the additional protocols that they take on that data as well. But that is securely in Microsoft by Microsoft engineers housed on Microsoft equipment. So our deal is directly with Microsoft in that fashion.
Okay. And then the company I work for, they're starting to use the same, and it's all based on your email address is your access or your, I guess, would be my license. So getting back to Alderman Noriko's question, if an employee left, are we forfeiting that license, or are we just changing the email address that was attached to a license, or how is that?
My understanding is the license would then be available for use.
Okay.
There's a synchronization that occurs between our network and Microsoft's network that manages the security end of it. I know you didn't ask this question, but I'll throw an answer out there anyway. But as that's managed on our end, that synchronizes back up to Microsoft's cloud, and then it opens that license back up for us to be able to reassign.
Alderman Marquardt.
Are there any hardware or operating system issues that will have to be addressed with the end users when you talk about you have the 3 different versions of Microsoft Office? You know, or is there additional upgrades that you're going to have to do?
I haven't gotten into the details of the deployment just yet because I wanted to get Liftoff's or whoever we recommended and approved. I wanted to get their thoughts on the best way to implement this. Our goal is to actually do more of an automated deployment if possible, because obviously that would save staff time to be able to be allocated elsewhere. So.
Alderman Favorite.
I'm just full of questions tonight. So in thinking about the cloud, and obviously the majority of our data, and not all of our systems, but the majority of our Microsoft-based systems would be available in the cloud. Does this have any impact on server storage that we currently are purchasing or that we currently have? And does this impact our like emergency operations center? Is this a positive impact on that? Or is it not really going to make any impact on that?
So first off, from a on-premise resource consideration, it does have an impact. Really, from an employee standpoint, it's not going to be very noticeable. From an IT standpoint, it's going to be a very big deal. Microsoft Exchange Server is, for lack of a better term, a resource hog. It uses a lot of resources, to the point where we can literally load potentially 4 application servers in that space that Exchange is currently using, which is why it's nicer to be able to shove that off onto Microsoft's equipment and get it off of ours. From a usability standpoint, from EOC or other means, I believe it will be a very positive impact on that. Like I said, we can now store things into the cloud and have access through the internet from any internet-enabled device virtually. I mean, I haven't gone through everyone, but iOS, Android, or Apple, Android, Windows, those devices all either have apps or have native capabilities to access it, provided your login works and you have a valid, a good internet connection. From a resource side, from the user standpoint, I've been in communities that have offloaded into the cloud. I can tell you it's not like all of a sudden we have all of this free space and everyone's just using the cloud. There's a lot of things that it really works well for, and there's some other things that storing it locally makes more sense. So I don't believe it's an all or nothing proposition. I think we're going to see a healthy split between the use of it and also use of on-premise resources.
Alderman Fagan. Is it going to have a change in the resource requirements of, say, a laptop or a tablet? Is it now going to be, we're not going to need to buy the top end?
I don't want to say that. We spec for this regardless, and we replace when it can no longer run it. So I think that goes back to your question as well. From a hardware standpoint, we specify machines to accommodate that system, whether it uses it or not. I'm hoping eventually there's even more changes on the horizon that we can research and look at that might be able to offload that. There's some things I've done in other communities that we were able to start looking at less expensive devices that did more. However, that's a significant paradigm shift in how I think it sort of exceeds our maturity model from a technology standpoint right now. I think we've got a few more things we've got to get to. That might be step 6, and we're still sort of at step 2 or 3, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Motion carried. Sometime over the last couple of months, 3 aldermen requested that we have a discussion on residency requirements for employees. We're not being asked to make any firm decisions tonight, from what I understand, but we do want to have that discussion. So I would ask for a motion to open that item up for discussion, residency requirement for employees.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Our Human Resources Director, Chris Randall, will speak to this item. Chris?
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Mayor, Council. This item, as the Mayor mentioned, is for discussion only and is being brought by request by 3 aldermen. I'm going to provide you a very high-level overall overview of some of the areas that could involve residency requirements. So starting first with some of the legal ramifications. For several years, there's many legal cases involving challenging residency requirements. And some of the reasons brought forward by employees is their claims that they prefer to have a choice to live where they wish and provide for their families as they best see fit. The courts, however, federal courts, they upheld residency requirements are being constitutional as long as the employer provides a rational, what the courts mean, rational reason for that requirement, and could be such as emergency response. Continuing with the legal ramifications, collective bargaining agreements, as you are aware, the city, certain employees of the city of DeKalb is represented by 3 unions. And each one of them, they do have residency requirements in their agreements, which is provided on the maps with your agenda items. And labor boards have found that residency proposals to be mandatory subject to bargaining. So any implementations or changes or modifications will be encountered with a demand to bargain. For the non-bargaining unit employees, Chapter 3, Section 3.46, residency requirements for the city, for city employees. Certain positions classify as emergency response. They have a certain residency requirement currently. The map is also included in the agenda package. History of past ordinances. In 2011, Council amended the 346, eliminating residency requirement for all department heads, except the ones classified as emergency response. This action was due to the challenges in recruiting qualified candidates for the position of Public Works Director. In 2016, Council also temporarily waived the residency requirements for the same reason as the reason in 2016. And I did this that time owing to the hardships in finding qualified candidates to fill the position of IT director. It's also in your packet, both of those amendments for your review. Comparable communities. Of the seekage recognized, identified comparable communities, 30% do not have any residency requirements for any position. For the ones that have residency requirements is for city manager at about 33%, police and fire chief at about the same percentage. Belvedere, Hanover Park, Hoffman Estates, Rolling Meadows, Romeo View, and Streamwood, they have no requirements for any position. And Sycamore, they do have requirements, but it's general as at the 20 miles radius from their municipal center. We went further and we looked at other municipalities, not only the comparables. And I need to give a huge thank you to management intern Walker Steinke. He surveyed over 120 municipalities of the Chicago metro region to be, in a timely manner, to be able to have that information to council. Of those, 95 responded, and 48% do not have any residency requirements for any position. And when there is residency requirements, it's usually for the three positions: city manager, police, and fire. More specific numbers are available in your package. As we were researching this topic, we also came across a recent case of the village of Timley Park. Very recently, September 5th, 2017, their board, their elected officials during their board meeting unanimously vote to ease their residency requirements for their employees. And the reasons cited was recruitment challenges and that they were missing opportunities in finding a bigger candidate pool of candidates. And speaking of recruitment challenges, the city, not only the city of DeKalb, but also cities around the country and surrounding communities have been experiencing recruitment challenges with a very scarce availability of qualified candidates. This is good news for employees or for folks looking for jobs. Unemployment is really low, but it's really not so good for employers and municipalities all around the country. They're competing for attract top talent. There are many publications too regarding this topic, and the predictions appears that this trend is not going to ease for the upcoming years. When you combine that with the challenges that we're currently having, in that in less than 3 years, we're going to see 54 employees of the city of DeKalb eligible for retirement, that could create a really big strain on recruitment. I also reach out to several peers, other communities, and professionals in the area to see what their take on this, not only looking for literature or surveys. And I got the same consensus that residency requirement is certainly very understandable in certain positions, such as the city manager, police and fire. But for restricting residency for other positions might really be a struggle in finding qualified candidates to fill positions. Heidi Voorhees, president of the GovHR, a leading organization public sector recruitment, she also provided some thoughts. It's all in your package, very comprised and comprehensive bullet points that she provided, but mainly the reasons that she cites is that generations ago it was expected to the family to move and go to other jobs, and usually it was the father's job, and everybody knew that they had to relocate. That's no longer the case. There's many two-career families. There are folks with aging parents that they are reluctant to also move and be far from their parents. Another figure that Heidi provided is the boomers are retiring, and there are at least 10 million fewer upcoming generations than the boomers, so we're already in the disadvantage of numbers, and we need to be as flexible as possible in recruitment. In summary, you have the information before you. Regardless of residency, employees who are skills and what they do, and they're committed to public good and act in an innovative and ethical manner to a responsible government, should be allowed to compete for jobs without restrictions of residency. Data shows that many municipalities even went away from requiring the city manager position to reside locally. In instances where the residency is required, as I mentioned before, is for the 3 positions, city manager, police, and fire, due to their immediate emergency response. And as the city of DeKalb faces many vacancies due to future needs and of recruitment due to retirement, we also need to keep in mind that we need to make everything that we can to attract a large pool of candidates. I know it's a very concise presentation, and you have all the information in front of you. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Alderman Fanouken.
Well, I was one of the aldermen that asked for this discussion, and unfortunately, this staff documents provided clouds the issue by including the unions. We know those are bargaining things that occurred where those are set by their contract. So those are not even part of this discussion as far as I'm concerned. I think I can speak for the other aldermen as well. But there are other positions within the city that some of us feel should be resident requirement. Now, for example, as part of her contract, Anne Marie Gore lives within the city and has since within a year of her hire. So, I mean, those are some of the things that we're looking to do to have employees have a more vested interest in the city. Now, you know, I'm not going to go off the top of my head and say this position, this position, this position, but I think that it's certainly worth some further discussion. I do realize that for some positions it does cause some issues. I know that prior to my being on council, there was a public works director who did not want to live in town, and so it got waived at that time. I think we've done the same for our current IT director, but I think it's worth the discussion amongst us on council where we all sit on that. I would prefer to see some type of residency requirements.
And just to clarify, we included the bargaining unit because I really didn't have any direction where the residency requirement discussion was going, and I just want to encompass all the variables.
Well, you know, you mentioned, though, that there's 54 future retirements, but that's really only, looking at your chart, only 10 that aren't in the bargaining unit. So saying 54 makes it look a much bigger challenge than it actually is.
Alderman Verbeek, I know you were one who wanted to have this discussed. Do you have any questions? Was this report pretty much what you were looking for?
Yeah, again, I continue to agree with Bill in that I believe certainly leadership positions within the city of DeKalb should, our preference should be that they reside in DeKalb, that there's a commitment to living in the city of DeKalb, being a part of what we have going on. And I think that with that will also decrease perhaps the possibility of turnover, making this their home.
Alderman Noriko.
I disagree. I think that it makes sense to have the residency requirement for the city manager, police, and fire chiefs. I believe, and I've seen evidence with current city staff, that an individual can be committed to the city, can be committed to their job and their responsibilities, and not reside in the city of DeKalb for a variety of reasons, and still be very credible in coming forward with positive ideas for their position and for the city. And I've been in the position of recruiting for hard-to-fill positions. And, you know, as difficult as it was at those times, I try to imagine how much more difficult it would have been if I had had to deal with an additional requirement such as a residency requirement. Perhaps a compromise position would be to indicate a preference for residing in the city, but then there's an obligation that, which we're working towards in a whole variety of ways, that the city is attractive for people to live here.
Thank you, Kate. Alderman Jacobson.
I can see the merits of both sides of the argument. I don't feel that in our operation we have such technical positions to say that any position in our organization couldn't be filled by someone I can think of locally that would do a good job in that position. Do I believe that there are probably much more well-equipped someone to sit on city council in my ward? Sure, outside of the city of DeKalb, probably, but that wouldn't make sense for the city of DeKalb to have a non-resident serving in that capacity. Again, I looking at NIU and the draw that they bring in people to this community, lots of people come to work at NIU, few of them live in DeKalb. We talk about economic development, we talk about internal growth and supplanting existing business specifically, and you're talking by moving management to be required into the city of bringing millions of dollars in guaranteed income back to be spent within DeKalb on meals, on services, on all those daily life things that you need to spend. From the same perspective, I can understand and certainly see why some residents have some heartburn over the fact that they are paying the retirements for the rest of the lives of people that don't live here. Especially when looking at their property taxes, saying, my property taxes are the highest in the state and some of the highest in the country, for people to not live here and to never be part of our community. While I appreciate that, yes, you can come and be a professional and do your job correctly not living here, again, that you would be the same professional whether you lived here or you didn't. And in the reality of things, there are plenty of competent people out there to fill positions. while I understand some very technical positions based on the need in the market changes, again, when we went out for our police chief, when we went out for our city manager, when we went out for our top spots, we got dozens of applications. We had to narrow them down to different pools just to have the discussion. I'd love for all of our city staff to live here voluntarily. Again, if you truly believe this is a great community to live, work, play, learn, whatever new euphemism we bring up, then you should live here. It's our taxpayers paying your salaries. If you're not living here, you are contributing to part of the problem in terms of lack of high-income individuals, in terms of lack of wealth in the community, in terms of lack of stabilization in some of these neighborhoods. And we have the opportunity to fix that. Again, I believe that there may be a possibility in the future to go on a case-by-case basis if we had a superstar candidate that for some reason couldn't live in DeKalb, not just wouldn't live in DeKalb, and there are two very different distinctions. Again, I'd like to see we push toward the bargaining units eventually doing the same thing. Our only option at this point is to discuss non-bargaining unit employees and then set direction for future union negotiations. And I would firmly support it. I don't believe in terms that we could not find a qualified candidate. I would rather a B-plus candidate that lived in DeKalb than an A-minus candidate that lived in St. Charles. That's just my perception of the issue.
Alderman Verbeek.
And I think capturing some of those dollars, I think the last time I checked, our average total compensation for full-time FTE, per FTE at the city of DeKalb was $130,000, including all benefits and salary compensation. So I would argue that we pay pretty well. I think our median household income in DeKalb is $39,000. So I think your money would go a long way in DeKalb, and I think that's our point, is how do we capture that? How do we capture investment back in the city?
Alderman Favor?
I would support the preference for residency and the ability to have an exception, again, if, as Alderman Jacobson said, if there's that star candidate that we would make the exception for.
Alderman Marquardt.
And I support residency requirements when they can be classified as a requirement, a rational requirement of a job. I can go, have you heard? I can go on Amazon and buy anything that's not coming here. I could live here and I can buy just about anything online and have it come to my house. That's not putting anything into this community. I can go to Walmart. The profits from Walmart don't get reinvested into this community. They get reinvested all over the place, right? You have to change your mindset a little bit here and realize that we are a global society. You know, I understand the argument that people who are paying taxes feel that it should go to support only people who live, work, and play in DeKalb. I can kind of get that a little bit, but I also think that we're doing a disservice by having a B+. Why should we strive for B+? Then we're just frustrated all over again. That doesn't work for me. I would rather that we had the A employees. It doesn't work for me to hire B+ in DeKalb. I work with plenty of B+ people who live in DeKalb every day. I have the bruises on my head from beating it against the wall. I would much rather have somebody who could do the job, and if they wanted to drive from Cortland, or if they wanted to drive from, I don't know, wherever to do the job, that'd be great. So, you know, we go to wherever we're going to get the best deal on so many things in our personal purchasing habits that it's not like we just go to the corner store to do any of that and invest in our city anymore. You know? How many people up here bought their car in DeKalb? All right.
They brought it to DeKalb.
How many people brought their car to DeKalb? All right. So to get hung up on these residency requirements, I think is a waste in so many aspects. And I think what we need to do is to refocus our efforts on other employment opportunities in our city so that we make our city actually attractive for other people to work here. And that will raise our city stature. And there are plenty of people that work for this city who do a great job that may live so far out of town. If you're going to do a residency requirement, I think you got to be big about it. You know, I don't think you can limit yourself. Shoot, I can do work for using Office 365 or whatever, the cloud thing. I can do work for somebody in California. You know, my wife works part-time or whatever for a person she's never even seen. 12 years. Person lives in Colorado and Arizona. She's never met the person she works for. And she's providing a great service. So I don't want you to cut our throats in order to get so much into this residency requirement. That would be my only, I guess, passionate plea.
If I may just add one little thing, I think what makes Illinois so unique in many aspects is that is the state with the most units of government. We have 6,800 plus units of government. If everybody, and so sometimes you can drive 10 minutes and you cross 3-4 towns. The urbanization makes the boundaries so blurry. So you can be in one side of the street and be in 3 different towns depending on where you are. And the issue is not only with the residency requirement, is also how you're going to enforce it after that. So there is a lot of evidence, and I did not include it in a memo because I didn't have time to find data to back up, but commuter taxes for folks that live in a place, they and work somewhere else, lunches, dinners, gas, all of those types of taxes sometimes equates to even more property taxes. And a residency requirement is going to be, do you have to purchase a property? Do you have to rent it? So that won't make a lot of difference besides filling a vacant rental. So I think that's what makes it unique.
I want to cut to the chase. We have some A-plus people on the city of DeKalb payroll who don't necessarily live in DeKalb. Now, having said that, one of my first public pronouncements was that I like residency, and I go along with Alderman Fanouken. However, I believe that a common ground here may be what Alderman Favor suggested, and that is, and I don't know what the pleasure of the council is to do moving forward on this, but the idea that residency is preferred. Residency preferred sends a message. I hope it's a positive one. But to require residency for all employees, obviously we can't for some right now, just doesn't seem to be something that makes any sense for us now, or that is possible. Having said that, my question is, what is the wishes of the council? we can simply treat this as a informational item where we've all expressed our opinion, and I think all of us have expressed our opinion tonight on this issue. Or we could move to directing staff to devise an ordinance, which perhaps is for those people who are not fire and police and others who already have their bargaining unit folks. We can ask that something a little bit more specific be brought back to the council for your consideration. So with that, what is the pleasure of the council?
Mayor, before the council provides consensus, if I can offer just a couple thoughts,
sure.
building on what what the HR director has said. So number one, just so you know, I want to use a recent example. Mayor Smith came to me when it was time to fill the finance director position, and the residency was not required in the municipal code for that position. And he said he felt very strongly about it, and I said I would work with him on that, and I would do my best to try to recruit a candidate that was talented, that wanted to come live in DeKalb. I was very fortunate to be able to hire Molly Talkington as our finance director. So I have pledged to you that when there is something, a position that you feel very strongly about, I pledged to you I would do my best, which I did, and fortunately I was able to fulfill that. I want you to know, though, we are getting, in some positions, we're not even getting into double digits on candidates that are applying. We have some positions that we're seeing under 10 candidates. So our pool of candidates is directly shrinking. When it came to the finance director position, there was no one that lived in DeKalb that applied for the position. In fact, Mayor Smith had said to me that he assumed that with the number of people at Northern Illinois University that we'd get some NIU folks applying. We didn't. We had one person who lived within the city of DeKalb apply for the IT director position, who I was going to interview, withdrew from the process. So that's one for two of the most recent director positions. So I just want you to know, whatever decision you make, our pool of candidates is shrinking based on demographics, based on the retirement of the baby boomers. If you put residency on for non-bargaining unit positions, you're looking at the types of positions that you have, you're shrinking the pool of candidates that either live in the region or want to drive to fulfill their requirement or to serve the city of DeKalb. The last thing I would have to say, and I'll be deficient if I don't say this, I have the privilege of serving with the most talented group of senior management professionals I have worked with in my career. This is the 6th municipality I've served in my career. By far, the most talented. I'm going to disagree with one of the statements made here earlier tonight. I don't want to hire someone who is a B+ when I can hire the A+ candidate, when I can hire someone who's going to make a difference in the lives of our citizens by what they do. The people that are sitting up here and I know the mayor knows this because he's in the building every day, but the rest of the council may not know this. The people that I have the privilege of serving with, whether they live in this community or they don't live in this community, give this community 110% of their time. I see emails coming from them at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, on weekends. If I have an issue that I need to reach them on, they're there. So regardless of what you do, I want you to know that the people that serve this community at all levels in this organization, but particularly the senior management that I work closest with, are giving this community 110% regardless of where they live.
Alderman Jacobson.
I appreciate that many of our staff give 110%. To believe that we have the best staff in the state or the country, we couldn't afford them. I mean, top managers make double or triple what you do. We could never afford that. So to believe that we have the best, I think, is a false sense of security to begin with, in fairness. And again, in saying B+, I'm saying the candidates that may not be baby boomers, the guys that maybe are the guys and women out there that may be a little younger in their careers, that could be life-changing or city-changing innovators that don't meet the 10 or 15-year qualification of service to meet our bar of service. The guys or the people that come in and are from a different generation that would be B+ in terms of their length of service, not their quality of service or not their knowledge. The people that with a community engaged role, we could develop into A+ people, not only for our city business operation, but for our community. That's what I want to see us bring in. I want to bring in people that are A+ talent, that want to live, again, that don't just want to work here, that want to live and contribute to the local community and be there for their neighbors and do all those things, because those benefits are significant in terms of recruiting and attracting higher wealth individuals to our communities. That's the reality. People of higher income and social status want those people locally to rely on and to engage with. That's how the world works. And again, when we say we would love to have more young professionals or high income professionals or living wage jobs in the community, in reality, we can't control most of those things. In terms of our business, we can control those things. And again, I would imagine and believe that in many cases, if we told those candidates that did get offered the job that they must live here, in more cases than not, they'd probably find a way to move here in reality. And again, let's go out and see the reality. If we go out and have to refill positions and can't find quality staff, which again, I don't believe, we'll have another discussion. But I thought it was a mistake right before I joined the council when they relaxed those requirements, and it's now taken 6 years to get us back to this discussion. But Chicago does it very effectively. They require all of their employees to live within city limits, and it works. And people move there. Sometimes people have 2 houses, but they move there, and they live there, and they pay taxes there. And that benefit that we all know as residents of having local expertise to rely on and having the connections in the community that when you need something or need information or need those things, that you can immediately reach out to someone that has those strengths because you know them, you grew up with them, you've spent your adult life with those people. You can rely on those people both for information and help and assistance and guidance and those things. I truly believe there's a lack of that benefit, which is a significant one when you bring in out-of-town people. And I think the community feels that way as well. That's just the reality of this community.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, may I add something, please?
Yes, Tim.
I think I would be remiss if I didn't convey my personal experience. I think the question was about making it a requirement in writing versus allowing the city manager and others to encourage the candidates. And with that regard, City Manager Gara described the recruitment of the finance director. I'd also like to share my experience because as the public works director, when I was recruited, there was not a residency requirement. And I went through the process, and through my discussions with City Manager Gara, it became crystal clear to me that she wanted the Public Works Director to live in the city. And so without the requirement, I wanted to move here to meet that, that desire of the city manager to have me live here. So I wanted you to know kind of from the inside what those discussions are like between candidates and the city manager or others who are interviewing the candidates. It was, it wasn't written, but it was strongly encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. What's the pleasure of the council? Are you satisfied that we stopped with the discussion, or I would entertain any motion that we move more forward in a more formal way?
I'd like to see it going forward.
Okay. Alderman Fanouken?
Like I said, I have a preference for city residents for non-bargaining unit employees. However, I could agree to including preferred in our moving forward, and maybe we could look to draft an ordinance to that effect for the appropriate chapter.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Alderman Fagan, do you want to second that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
So,
Why are we?
Well, wait a minute, wait. There isn't really
Respectfully-
anything to vote on here at this
Yeah,
point
we
in time.
don't- yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I think we're just looking for some type of consensus rather than an
Oh, okay,
actual vote.
I'm fine with
So
consensus.
I think that, like I said, if
I'm fine with
if
consensus.
enough of the council would tend to agree that we move in that direction of having a residence preferred, and I think that, hope that staff would find they could live with that as a recommendation.
Alderman Norrico?
While I was not in favor of expanding the residency requirement, I can live with residency preferred, and knowing that as city staff recruit for positions, they will honestly review the applications, the application material that comes in, and then, for candidates who move through the interview process, have the kind of discussion that Director Haldeman talked about, encouraging people to live in DeKalb, talking about the benefits of living in the area. But I really don't want management's hands tied so that if there's that A candidate who, for whatever reason, any number of personal reasons, can't move to DeKalb, that person shouldn't be thrown out of the process. So again, bottom line, preferred okay.
Alderman Jacobson?
Again, the reality isn't how you list these positions and advertise them. Preferred means nothing. We always would prefer our employees to live in DeKalb. I'd prefer that taxes didn't go up, but that doesn't mean anything. There's no reality behind that. When you're listing the positions, if they were required, all of those positions would clearly state, this position, you are required to live in DeKalb. You are required to take up residency into DeKalb within that 15-month or whatever our code says. Again, I would like to see it have some strength behind it and have some reality behind it so that all positions are listed as required. If we don't feel then we have found any qualified candidates, then we could go out and roll it back down to preferred. But I would like to see all of our positions going forward as required to live here, and let them either state why they can't at that point, or have to go back out and roll that down to increase the pool. I do believe if you went out, much like we did with our finance director, you will find a good candidate even with a requirement.
Alderman Norrico?
But someone who might otherwise be a candidate sees required and is like, well, forget it, I can't do that, I'm not even going to apply. So people are self-selecting out. And then if you get to the point that you don't have adequate candidates or such a small pool, you're just lengthening the recruitment process.
It appears to me as your mayor, David, that your suggestion may be a little bit too dramatic for this council at this point. Would the council agree to consensus that what we could do, and this council sets policy. We could set a policy, I think, our city attorney is sitting there, he could judge on this, to direct our human resource department and all department heads going forward in advertising for new employees that residency is preferred, but not necessarily required. That sends a message that I don't think, Chris, we're sending now, right?
Correct.
We have no residency preferred stipulation on for any of our new hires. But if we were to do that, I think it simply sends a message that, hey, this city council feels that residency is preferred. It's not required. That might take us a little bit closer to where we want to be. Now, is that a reasonable compromise, if you will, between what I hear here or not? And if it is,
It's okay with me.
I would welcome any comments, yes.
I would.
All in favor?
It does, I mean, it's a compromise.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't think the council has ever not considered someone who wasn't able to make the residency requirement, and I think we've not hired someone because they couldn't make the required residency.
But Tony, we've never said, in most cases, that residency is preferred.
No, we did, we had, so.
Oh, have we?
The
Okay.
IT director, I think we had
Well,
started, was
no,
that
I'm
not?
talking about across the board.
No, but I'm saying on a case-by-case
Yeah,
basis.
yeah, okay.
I think we've approved almost every single one. I don't know.
Alderman.
Again, it
Alderman
doesn't mean
Jacobson.
anything. I'd prefer there wasn't shootings on Greek Row. I'd prefer we didn't have a rental surplus. That doesn't mean anything's gonna change. That doesn't give any real legs behind what you're trying to do.
But certainly gives more legs than what we have now, I think.
I'm really, in essence, it's not. If we put up a big sign in front of Greek Row, we prefer you didn't commit crime here, it didn't change any of what's going on out there. We can hope and dream and wish it did, but in reality, it didn't mean anything. So I don't find it really to be a compromise. At the very least, yes, I'd probably support that with significantly more direction and discussion on the topic.
We're getting there now.
Because that's what we are now. We prefer our employees to be here now. It doesn't change anything by saying that.
Alderman Markwood.
I think the council, if I'm reading it correctly, that more of the council would be for the require than the prefer. I think you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 probably requires, 2 that, 1 that would be a preferred, me that unless it's a bona fide requirement of the position, I really don't care where they live. As long as they can do the job. If they can't do the job, then they're fired. That's me. So I think probably the basis of what you're seeing here is more required than preferred on the city council. As a compromise, preferred is a good compromise, and if you want to compromise on that, that would be my take as a direction going forward. I would offer that up as a compromise because David's not so much.
Right.
Bill's for it, Kate's for it. You could go kind of whatever. So kind of wishy-washy on the preferred part.
Is there anyone here who would not live with that compromise, other than perhaps
No.
David?
I would live with that compromise to start.
It's a step, it's a
And saying I
start.
don't want to be hurt, it's not saying, well, I don't want to be shot and stabbed. If we can get agreed that I don't want to be stabbed, that would be great. Let's work toward better.
Don't push your luck, Dave.
Hey, Mayor,
Let's
can I
advertise this.
suggest this? I'd like to offer a suggestion for the council to consider, and
Sure.
I haven't discussed this with HR, so Chris can tell me whether this is possible or not.
You can discuss it right here. so-
Yes, so if the council goes in the direction of preferred, number one, we would make all those changes moving forward on positions. Number two, we would modify any position that is currently posted and make that change so that we would put revised and highlight that. But number three, the idea that I had as I'm listening to this is what if you go forward with the preferred option right now, is let's track the data. We'll advertise all these as preferred, but I think and I'm going to look to our HR director, and then if we have to check from a legal perspective, I think as we go through the process, if we can, it would be good legally, if we can do this, to ask the candidates, would you be willing to move to DeKalb? So in order to be considered for this.
Our current application process already asked that question.
So let's start tracking it, and if you give us 6 months' worth of time, we will bring back all that data to you. So we won't call out the positions, but we can show X number of positions, how many people applied. That just gives you additional information as we move forward, and be able to show you. The other thing, if you did go to the perspective of requiring residency, then the next question that I would want to ask is, when are we offering relocation services? Because for certain positions, if you're going to do that, then you need to factor in the cost of moving that person. But what I wanted to emphasize is if you go in the direction of preferred, let us start collecting the data, get you a subset and bring that back. And whether it's 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, you tell us, and we'll tell you what we're finding.
It sounds like a plan.
And
Alderman Fanouken.
I would, agree with Anne Marie in compiling the data. I think 6 months may be too short a time period. I'd say a year before the end of, at the end of FY18.
Okay. Yes, good idea.
We can certainly do that.
Alderman.
I think we have a consensus now,
Okay,
to tell you the
consensus,
truth.
okay.
So,
So in other words, we
again, I
don't-
would agree with Alderman Markwart's counts. Again, in saying let's wait for a year, we waited for a year for priority budgeting. We never got it.
Yeah, but we've gotten a step that we don't have right now by putting that residency preferred.
Again, I'd prefer to
immediately.
push it now and get
Push
it
it.
on the books. And if we see that A, we can't recruit talent, or B, that we don't see, or that we're seeing bad data from it, we can make those decisions on a case-by-case council basis. Again, I don't think that should be a staff call as to whether or not to blanket exempt someone. I think that should be a council decision.
That's why I said we set policy.
Correct.
We move
And I
this
think we
forward.
need to have that discussion
and we-
sooner
and we
rather than
say-
later.
We say in no uncertain terms, hey, this is what we want to do. All of our positions from this day forward, staff or residency is preferred. I really feel that in a year, I think we will see that it will bear us fruit. And I really also, and again, I know I see the glass half full all the time, but what I like about this is that it would also give us the opportunity to work with, through Chris, our human resources person, excuse me.
It's getting late.
Our human resources director to perhaps set up a program where, when we're hiring an individual, whether that be an entry-level position in our public works department, so that perhaps our department heads need some kind of a packet or some kind of and I don't want to say incentive yet, but some kind of of a message to our employees about this is what makes DeKalb so good. This is what makes DeKalb a good community. This is why you want to stay here. This is why you want to grow. And if we could do all of that, I really think that maybe in a year from now, we're going to be much more satisfied with taking a look at our palette of employees and saying, yeah, we've spiked up a couple dozen. A couple dozen people now live here that didn't live here in 2017. It's worth a try, in my estimation. Consensus?
Yes.
No action needed? Thank you.
Thank
Chris.
you.
Okay. Moving along to item number I on our agenda, and that's communications. I'd ask each of the council members if they have anything to report or communicate. Alderman Jacobson.
No report.
Alderman Fanouken.
Actually, two things, if I may. This Friday, the 17th, at the Salvation Army, it's Let's Talk Turkey, where they're accepting frozen turkey and other frozen meat products, including T.D. Ryan's asking for lamb shanks all the time. But otherwise, the other thing I wanted to ask our Public Works Director, if he's aware if there's any issues with the horn warning system, because every train going through here tonight has been blowing its own horn very loudly. So maybe that might be something to look into. Thank you.
Alderman Marquardt.
No report.
Alderman Fagan.
No report.
Alderman Noriko.
On Saturday, December 2nd, Downtown Merchants are having a special event. I was talking with one of them, and there's going to be appetizers and wine and so forth. There is a charge for it, but I'd encourage people to check out. I'm sure the chamber website has information, but it sounds like a fun evening, and I look forward to seeing other people there.
Thank you, Kate. Alderman Verbeek.
No report.
Alderman Favor.
No report.
I do have a couple of items. Following the Environmental Commission's recommendation that no changes be made to the outdoor smoking ordinance, they did act on that since we met last. The city's Economic Development Commission accepted the request of Alderman Jacobson to place it on its next meeting in December. As a result, input from those two commissions is expected to be brought back to us in January, probably. Okay? Last week was exceptionally busy for all of us. The police department hosted a very well-attended public safety meeting. The council had two lengthy budget workshops. The Annie Glidden Task Force held its second meeting on the heels of a Annie Glidden North community meeting. And this past Saturday, a very large and enthusiastic crowd attended the U.S. Army Field Band concert at the Egyptian Theater. Noteworthy was inclusion into the evening's program of DeKalb Boy Scouts, the DeKalb High School Band, and a few comments from your mayor. While I can no longer fit into my 3rd Infantry Division uniform, I'm still proud of being an Army veteran, and especially proud of how DeKalb turned out last weekend, including our police chief, Gene Lowry, who stood and welcomed everybody as they came into that theater and said goodnight to everybody as you left. And Gene, thank you very much for doing that. What a message that sent. Thank you. That concludes my remarks. Now let's go down the row here. Alderman, not Alderman, but City Clerk Herman.
No report.
Okay. Dean Frieders, our City Attorney.
Just briefly, just for clarification of the record, the motion that was passed this evening with regard to the tax levy was to approve the amended resolution inclusive of a levy established at 105% of last year's levy. That's what we'll publish based on
105.2.
105.2, I apologize, 105.2%. The truth in taxation levy is based on the full levy that's established, so it includes both the amounts that are extended or actually billed to residents and the amounts that are abated. That's what your total levy is based on. So we will publish based on that. The City Council still retains the ability to approve a levy that is higher or lower than that. And whatever direction the council goes, we will assess and see if we need to do a second round of truth in taxation notices. Second, I wanted to report the Rotary conducted a very successful Trucktober event earlier this fall, as the council is aware. In the lead up to that, there was some discussion about how the city's various ordinances are coordinated in terms of licensing that event. And the city council has already taken some action to streamline that process, but we had a great meeting today with leadership to discuss how their event will happen next year in 2018. They are looking forward to a very successful event next fall already. I would again reach out to any organization in the community that's seeking to hold public events. If you let us know in advance, we are happy to work with you and try and do everything we can to make them successful and easy to accomplish. We are trying to set up those meetings now that we can get in front of the council early next year and get council authorization for any events that require it and make that process as simple as possible so we can have a great outpouring of public events that the public can enjoy. Any organizations or members of organizations that have questions, please feel free to contact myself or community development staff, and we will do everything we can to support you and make your events better and more successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Our City Manager, Anne Marie Gora. It's getting late.
Thank you very much, Mayor. 3 quick items. Number one, I wanted to point out, we talked about this earlier tonight, but there is a joint City Council Finance Advisory Committee meeting Thursday at 5 p.m. in the council chambers. That agenda will be going out tomorrow with attachments. Number two, it was brought up this earlier today, just to encourage those who haven't signed up to volunteer your time for IHSA. I'm very proud to be serving as an ambassador. My husband and I did this 2 years ago, and we're looking forward, just hoping it's not as cold as it was 2 years ago. And number three, on a personal note, I wanted to say this is our 3rd Halloween here, and I think I mentioned this to the mayor, and the number of children that came to our door, we passed out between 500 to 600 pieces of candy. So it was, yes, believe it or not, we went and bought 600 pieces of candy because that's what we figured we gave out last year, and we gave probably about 50 shy of the 600 pieces. So it was a great night. Thank you.
Thank you. Assistant City Manager Patty Hoppenstedt.
No report.
Our Police Chief Gene Lowry.
No report.
Our Finance Director Molly Talkington.
No report.
Our Fire Chief Eric Hicks.
No report.
Our Community Development Director Joe Ellen Charlton.
No report.
Our Public Works Director Tim Holdeman.
No report.
Our Human Resources Director Chris Randall.
I'm gonna have a report. Mayor, I just want to echo your comments about the event on Saturday night. I want to give a shout out to the folks at the Egyptian Theater for their efforts to bring the United States Army Field Band to DeKalb in a beautiful day, Veterans Day. And when they recited in Flanders Field, there was not a dry eye on a session that I was sitting. It was very emotional. It was beautiful.
IT Director Mark Thorson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 quick items. One earlier actually today, we met with NIU regarding the digital lobby product and digital lobby project, and had a very productive meeting, and we're continuing work on that project. Additionally, I had the privilege back on November 5th to be a judge for the 2017 NIU Husky Hack. And it's a hackathon. It's a rather unique one in the country, really, because it is completely open to a variety of people. So we had middle school students all the way up to college students that were all given challenges in 24 hours to solve them. And some of the projects that came through, all of them were really good. Some of them stood out as absolutely awesome. To be done in that amount of time, and to hear the experiences from these students and adults as well that went through this process, it was something to behold. So I was really this I think is the 3rd year I've been a part of this, and I hope to continue as well. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone. We now are going to ask for recess for executive session, and I'd like to read the items for executive session. Approval to hold an executive session to discuss security procedures as provided for in 5 ILCS 120/2C8. Number 2, approval to hold an executive session to discuss pending or imminent litigation as provided for in 5 ILCS 120/2C11. And 3, approval to hold an executive session to discuss personnel as provided for in 5 ILCS 120/2C1. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Burbick,
No.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
I'd prefer not to, but we know how that's going, so I'll say yes.
Smith,
May I ask a question of our attorney first? If we decide to go into executive session, we do not have to act on all of these items that I announced, do we?
We do not.
Okay, so we could go to one or none if there's consensus in there.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. We're adjourned.
7 yes.
Or no, we're going to recess.
What are we doing?